With a stroke of a pen, he set off a series of connections that has grown into a global organisation of over 330,000 of us. Today, more than 175 years later, we've chosen our Founders' Day as a day to consider what has made us, what continues to make us, thrive. After one of our most challenging years, and one of individual perseverance and collective success, we encourage you to take a moment to reflect on our enduring values together and look around at who we are, at what we aspire to be, as we take this moment to say thank you.
谢谢
Grazie.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Deloitte.
For all that you've done this year, for our past, present, and future.
Good morning, Jumoke. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sure we're all excited to be here this morning. I'm super excited. We're here for our yearly talent management platform, which this year's theme is happened to be the new fundamentals of the boundaryless world. So as I said, the theme for this year's talent management platform, which is our human capital trend, is new fundamentals for our boundaryless world. And what is the implication for this boundaryless world? We have said that as we're all aware, the boundaries that we once assumed to be natural order of things for us, right, has begin to fall away. And for our organizations, the implication is that we begin to traverse a new landscape as we lose these traditional boundaries that has kept things together for us, that has permitted and again, permission to experiment, to pilot, and to innovate the way to define our new fundamentals. So this is the implication for us. I'll quickly run us through our program for the day, which is our agenda. And it's going to be an insightful 3 hours together. We're going to be introducing ourselves, the host for today, the moderators, the panelists, then we go into the polls. We have we are going to be having interactions where we have opportunity to ask questions, right? So I'll start with our introduction, then I'll heed the floor to Joseph to give us a welcome address. So quickly, our housekeeping rules. Please be present, unplug, disconnect, and be here. Be part of every moment this morning. Please, if you have any question, kindly make use of our question and answer features that you have on the tool. And where you need to provide comments, please make use of the chat box that we have on the tool as well. So this morning, I'm going to be introducing to you our host, which is Joseph Olofin-Shola. Joseph Olofin-Shola is a partner in the Human Capital Consulting West Africa, Deloitte. He's got an MBA. His background is in business administration, and he's got a series of certification from the finance space to risk management to human capital. And Joseph Olofin-Shola has been part of tremendous transformation initiative in our environment, both locally and within the African space. To be fair, he's got a wealth of experience from HR transformation to learning and development to leadership development and several others. He has a broad wealth of experience. So we would we'll have Joseph run us through the trends for this year. And my second and my first moderator here is Chizoba Mojeku. Chizoba Mojeku is the CHRO CEO Transformation and Executive Coach for Davtrot Consulting. She's got a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry. She's a certified global professional HR. She's a member of CIPM, and she's got several other certifications as well. Wealth of experience in the human capital space. She has over 25 years of experience, and she's led several HR and workforce transformation initiatives in our environment and globally. She's been opportune to work with some of the leading institutions such as Accenture, MTN, ECOWAS, Central Bank, and many more. So this is Uloma Chizoba. This is Chizoba Mojeku, pardon me, and she'll be moderating the session today. And the third is Olajumoke Pupola. Olajumoke Pupola is a senior manager in the human capital space. She's a certified human resource professional as well, and she's got over a decade of work experience. And she's been exposed to several HR transformation and organizational transformation initiative as well across the various industries that we have. So I'll hand the floor to Joseph to give us his welcome address. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much, Jumoke. I was wondering who Jumoke was when you talk about the third person, whether it's the same Jumoke that was talking to you. So thank you very much for that, for that opening comment and for setting the tone. So let me just add my voice to welcome all of us on this particular, event. I'm, very excited, and for me, it's something I always look forward to year in, year out in terms of, how we, jointly, unpack this trend. I mean, this is about the 13th, year of doing this, of talking about the HHC trend, and it's interesting how year on year we see different things evolving and things shaping, the landscape. This year, just like Jumoke had said, in terms of the fundamentals of, talking about the new fundamentals for a boundaryless world, which is a theme of this message of today's event. It's such interesting, and it's coming at a time where we see a lot of things shifting, a lot of new models happening. We're beginning to break, the so-called old boundaries, and we're beginning to move to, do new things, especially, even in the midst of chaos and confusion, where we, becoming even more agile. Now, going, to the message of the day or what is happening, what we see, in terms of the boundaryless world, we're seeing, shift in the area of jobs, of course, moving to skills. We'll talk more about that at some point. Employees, moving to workforce ecosystems, flexi work, which, the last few years, we talked about, to actually everything being flexible. We've seen a move from automation to augmentation. We've seen a move from productivity to more to human performance. So it's not about, seeing the human, but in terms of the performance of that human. And we're seeing, so that for me, it's so important, which, I think we thought 2 years ago, this was going to just go like that. But again, we can see that expanding. And that is where we're seeing a situation where it's no longer about the employer, leading the way, but actually, the worker, and also forming an agency. And for me, this is so interesting because we're going to, as we will be talking a bit more about this with a very interesting set of panelists that we'll put together for today. I'm sure we'll be able to do justice to that. Now, in terms of the participation, those who respond to the trend, the beauty of it is the fact that, it's such that it cuts across. starting from the C-suite, down to, of course, even to the student. And the reason for this is that it's so important that we capture, the views of different people, either in the workforce, in the workplace, or those who will be in the workplace, in the next couple of years. So this, what you see on the screen just gives you a snapshot of what the distribution of the respondents, and more importantly, the fact that 23% of that list is actually from the C-suite. Now, in terms of how how people responded, so again, this actually cut across different industries, sectors of the economy, whether it is banking and finance, whether it is telecoms, or whether it is oil and gas. So just name it. You have all them represented, in this survey. And also in terms of the worker, the type of workers, we also begin to see, like before, where we're seeing the consultants, the crowdsourced workers, the freelancers, the contractors, the gig workers, all being part of this. Interestingly, you'll see here that between gig workers, freelancers, and of course, it's quite, to look at the percentage, they're quite significant. So again, this speaks a lot. And, these are the things we're going to be talking about in the next couple of hours. So in terms of, this is, again, how we respond. That was from a global perspective. From a Nigerian perspective, it's pretty much almost the same thing, in terms of, who responded and what category they fell into. So from, the function that they represent, the levels they are in the economy, or in the organizations, the industry they belong to, it pretty much speaks or mirror what we see from a global perspective. Now, quickly moving to, the theme, of today, what are we seeing? For those who have been part of this over the last, 13 years, like I said, we typically will talk about the 10 top trends. There are several trends, but we'll focus on the top 10 trends. And today, in looking at unpacking that, trends, that theme of, how fundamentals are changing for the boundaryless world, three things actually jumped out, three sub-themes. So one is framing the challenge, think like a researcher, charting a new path and co-creating the relationship, and then of course, designing impact and prioritizing human outcomes. Now, quickly talking about framing, the challenge. So the whole idea here is, let's ask ourselves, how do we think as organizations, and you think like a researcher, and as workers, we also equally think as, as researchers, as the case may be. So what we're saying here is that there's the need to really, activate and, and elevate that, curiosity, between, by organizations and of course workers, where, we begin to look at every decision we take as some sort of experiment, and that provides some level of insight, thinking, new thought processes that then will continue to shape and change how we do things. Now, following from that is how do we chart, how do we chart a new path? So basically, in terms of charting a new path, so we're saying, as we think about, as we have different ideas, insights coming to play and coming to the fore, we also need to start thinking as organizations and as workers, how do we jointly navigate? How do we jointly co-create? Either we're co-creating a new relationship, we're co-creating new jobs, new roles, new ideas, new frontiers. So the whole idea is, how do we get, us to jointly work together? And because that becomes more meaningful and more value adding, both to, the workers and as well as the organization. So the focus here is, how do we co-create that relationship? Now, next to that clearly is, how then do we begin to, having created this relationship, what then is the next thing? How do we design for impact? So in designing for impact here, again, it's how do we, now thinking about creating that impact, not just looking at it from the point of view of the business. And this brings to the fore for me, what we said about 2 years ago, 2021, where we talked about the HC trend. And we also ran a special, survey where we theme, employee-employer relationship disrupted. What are we if we're not families? Now, because again, these are constantly being disrupted. And the reality is that, except we both design for impact and we prioritize the human outcomes, then it'll be a challenge, because the reality is that, like I said earlier, the worker agency is growing, you know, the expectations are growing, and it's important that we jointly begin to think from being a purpose-led organization as opposed to being just a profit-led organization. Now, trying to unpack this, you know, these themes, you know, a bit. So in terms of the, you know, the first one where we talk about things like researchers, what are the other sub-themes that came out? So first is navigating the end of jobs. Now, this for me is quite interesting, and I don't think we can actually do justice to this today. So we will be talking about this at some point where we're having a whole seminar, you know, talking about this. But really, for me, this is quite essential because this really changes how we think, how we act, you know, either as, you know, HR, you know, team, and even how our people actually respond to this. So prior to now, we looked at just being, you know, putting tasks together, boxing them to, you know, put them together in a box, and then a job is formed, a job description is designed. And the reality is that over time, we realize that that is not the way people work, right? So the whole idea is we're seeing that, you know, job coming to an end, and we're seeing skills being, you know, the next frontier and what we need to actually think about as we go forward. Now, the other part of it is, again, talking about human, you know, and technology. How do we, you know, move away from that, what I'll call a substitution framework, to what I'll call an augmentation framework, where, you know, the human, right, becomes more intelligent by, you know, leveraging on technology. And when the technology also learns, you know, from the human. So imagine where you have the robots, you know, giving you a position on something, and you actually overriding that position because you have learned, you have some other experiences, and then that is feedback into that, you know, robot, right? And that robot then learned from it. So how do we, you know, drive that impact, you know, that value, you know, bringing human beings and of course technology together? And how do we also then begin to activate the future workplace? And clearly in doing that, it means that with the advance of technology, new digital footprints, you know, today we're talking about AI. Now, AI is not new, but the reality is that AI is being elevated. That conversation is being heightened up because of different things. Because of the amount of data we're going to see today, the advancement in technologies that we're going to see today. So that in itself is also changing that conversation in terms of how then do we really define the workplace. And it's important that we begin to think about that workplace. So the other bit is, you know, co-creating relationship. So basically, in summary, what it's saying is that looking at worker data, looking at, you know, and when we talk about data, there's several data we can talk about, either from performance point of view, either from the service that we do, either from the assessment we do, you know, either from, you know, either it's passive or it is, you know, it is survey, it's active. At the end of the day, we have all manner of data that we see. And the question is, how are we, you know, using this data? Now, the workers are beginning to ask questions. This data are mine. But the reality is that this data that are mine are being used for the organization, but I don't seem to understand how it is being used. And that's the question. So the reality is that, you know, we need to begin to move to the point where we need to sit to negotiate that data. Because that is why, if that is not done, we will continue to have this apathy. You know, there's a survey today, people will not respond. And I've seen this over and over working with different organizations. So you have a survey and you realize an organization only 40% are responding. In some cases, it's 20%, and you have to struggle to get to 40%. And the reason is that they just don't know why they must respond. Because data have been collected in the past, even the ones we have, but the reality is that it's not being used, you know, in a way that benefits them. And they're wondering why it's not being used in a way that benefits them. So again, you know, then the other bit is, how do we harness the worker agency? Now, this is so critical in the sense that today, we all struggle with all manner of, whether it's jackpot, whether it's moonlighting, whether it's double dipping, whatever you want to call it, whether it's quiet quitting. The whole idea is this is actually also, you know, shifting that conversation to say, you know what, I don't own it all. So the era where organizations believe that, you know, they live in that, you know, illusion that, you know, we know it all, we have the control. That era has moved, and the workers are becoming more, you know, empowered, and therefore, you know, the question is, what do we do? How do we harness that whole power of the worker? How do we harness the fact that we can't, you know, the era where it's a case of, you know, you decide for me what to do. I want to decide what I can do. I want to decide where I want to work. Now, so that again is begin to say, how do we harness that? And then the other part of it is how, do we unlock the workforce ecosystem? Now, we all know, I mean, the last few years, some 5 years ago, we came up with a report saying the new organization, arriving by design. And I see that happening, I mean, year on year. So where we get to see that the worker today is not the workforce today, it's not the guy on the balance sheet or not the guys on the balance sheet. It actually the guys both on and off the balance sheet, whether it's a gig worker, whether it's a freelancer, and you can see from the survey trends, the people that responded to it, right? So that shows clearly that we need to actually be able to unlock that workforce ecosystem to the benefit of the organization and to the benefit of the individuals. And the reality here is that two things: choice with responsibility. Those things needs to be, there needs to be a balance between those two. Now, the last, of course, is where we prioritize the human outcomes, where we're trying to now, design for impact. And it means at this point, how do we take both steps with respect to driving equitable incomes? So the reality is we talk about the DIE, but how do we ensure that we drive those outcomes, not because it's a nice to have, but it's what we should do, and of course, those incomes will put people right at the center. Same thing for, advancing human element of sustainability. Now, sustainability, of course, we know is quite broad, right? And most times we look at sustainability from the point of view of what are those practices, that we need to have, and there's a lot around being the external point of view. But here we're saying at the end, we need to begin to also advance the human element of sustainability. What does it mean from a generation? What does it mean from where I work, how I work, and what and the last, of course, is how do we elevate the focus of human risk? Now, so here it's, of course, we talk about, the risk, when we talk about different things that we do. But the reality, again, is that, we do not do a lot in terms of the human element of the risk. So clearly, take a simple example, we do all manner of analysis, whether it's from a personal model, for this strategy. But the reality is that how do we constantly ask that question? What does it mean for how people work, where they work, and how they work? So what this is saying is that we need to rethink and expand and be a bit broader in terms of how we look at the human risk. So putting all this together, the focus here is we will only be able to lead in that boundaryless world when we do understand the interplay of these various this 9 elements that I spoke about. So now these things we see that have been colored in red are the things that came out from the Nigerian context. So when we did the survey, we typically will look at what happens from a global point of view, and then what happens from a local point of view. So from a local perspective, in terms of what are the response that people give, interesting, and that's why I'd be more than excited to hear from our panelists today what their views are. So these were the things that they called out, the issue of how they elevate the focus on human risk. How do we lead? What's the issue of lead in the boundaryless world from a leadership perspective? Of course, harnessing the worker agency, the Japa syndrome, talking about the future of work. People still believe that a lot of leadership are struggling to understand what future of work is all about. They don't even know even when this is what has come to stay, right? So and so that's a challenge that we keep talking about digital transformation, digital technology, but really not understanding that there are other underlying elements from a worker perspective. And today we'll see what is happening. There's so much around well-being is now becoming a major consideration. Mental health issues. So so there's so much for us to talk about. I'm not going to do the work for the panelists. I'm going to come back when required. But the elements, for me, the closing remark here is the fact that there's so much to deal with in this very short period. But it would be nice to also hear from our very intelligent, experienced panelists what their views are on some of this issue. So at this point, I'm going to turn the mic back to the moderators, and I'm going to sit back and listen to the interesting conversations that will happen on the back of this. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Joseph. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I think we need the floor to Chizoba to then introduce our panel members. So while we wait for Chizoba, I'm sure Joseph's introduction was quite insightful. We heard about the three focus of our of his conversation, where he talked about the major things that the three major things that jumped out to us, which is thinking like a researcher, creating a new path to co-create the relationship that we currently have, then designing for impact, prioritizing our human outcome. So I don't know what we think about that. That was quite insightful to me, and that's a whole lot of information. But like he did mention, I will leave that for our panel member to throw more insight in terms of how they get to do this or navigate this in their various institutions. I don't know if we have Chizoba now. Oh. Okay, while we wait for Chizoba, I'll go ahead with the introduction. So I'm super excited to introduce to you our 5 panel members, and our first on the list here is Esther Akinu-Kawe is the Chief Human Resources at MTN, and she's got wealth of experience. She's been involved in several HR initiatives in the telecom space. She's a successful human resource transformational business leader as well, and she's got some consulting and consulting background, educational background. She's worked in the bank and now in the communication space. Esther will be telling us so much about their experience in the various areas that we've highlighted in here. So we then have Steve Oje. Steve Oje is the resourcing and talent manager in Seplat Energy. He's got wealth of experience, a multi-degree individual from economics to social sciences, and his MBA is specialized in finance. He's going to be sharing his wealth of experience with us as relates to human capital. He has experience in the consulting, manufacturing, and oil and gas space as well. Dr. Oje has established himself as a leader in the human capital space, and he's been involved in several HR initiatives as well.
Okay, I can take over from you now. Now that I am back, that's what working in the future of work is all about. 1 minute you're on, and then the next minute you're off. But as usual, you will have almost a backup for your backup for your backup. So thank you very much, Jumoke. I believe you have introduced Esther, and you have introduced Dr. Oje.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I can carry on with the rest of the introductions. So we have Tina. Tina is our international leg on this conversation. Tina is the Chief People and Culture Officer at MasterCard Foundation, and she's got over 25 years across multiple diverse companies in Africa, Europe, and Middle East. Tina has been in telecommunications, having held several roles in Airtel in all its different rebirths and rebrands. And she holds 2 master's degrees and a doctorate degree. And Tina is going to be engaging us from an international perspective on these subject areas. Our next panelist is Franklin. Franklin is sitting at the intersection of traditional and the new world of work. Franklin is at InterSwitch, and he's leading the HR team at InterSwitch. He's had various experiences covering financial services, oil and gas, manufacturing, and technology. He did start in UBA. He worked in UBA. He also worked in TGI, for those of you who know TGI. And with him sitting at InterSwitch currently, Franklin is going to be frankly talking to us about the stuff that's going on in the new world of work and some of the exciting things that we have been seeing from InterSwitch. We also have Oiza Salu. I call her my cousin Oiza. Oiza has had over 20 years experience in financial services across customer service, corporate banking, e-business, and human resources management. All these people all started have degrees in areas that are not human resources, and just shows how versatile people are in terms of the work that we do in human resources. She's actually a chemical engineer, but she's done quite a lot in the human resources space. And also, you know, Oiza is a certified coach. So Oiza is going to be talking to us today more around, you know, what's going on within the financial services industry and around the activation of the future of a workplace. I am quite excited about the trends this morning because, you know, with this new boundaryless work and all the stuff that's going on, it's going to be an exciting conversation later, you know, as we talk to the panelists. So over to you, Jumoke, as we take our first poll of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for that introduction of our panel members. So everyone, I think it's time for us to get to connect, to share where you're connecting from, tell us your current role. Are you a specialist? Are you one of the HRBPs? Are you an HR leader? Or what exactly are you? Are you outside HR? Yes. Please make use of our chat box by dropping this in there. Type where you're connecting from and let's know your role as well. Thank you as you do this.
And while we're listening to where you're coming from and what you're doing, it would also help if you have read the report, the Human Capital Trends report. If you haven't seen it, a link will be dropped for you much later in the course of this conversation for you to see what the trends, the full report on the trends. But while you're at it, you know, there are many things that you may be wondering about, whether it's within this trend or outside this trend, within the space of the future of work. Please go to the chat, either to the chat or to the Q&A. Put down your questions, and that's why the panelists are here. They will be able to provide answers for you. So thank you very much. What are we seeing in terms of where people are coming from? So we see quite a few Lagos, and we are seeing HR leaders, HR professionals, HR BP, HR managers. Oh, Caroline, connecting from Warri. Thank you, Caroline. You just won yourself a book from us. You will be getting a book from Chizoba Mojeku. You are our first connection outside Lagos. Thank you very much.
From Manchester.
Somebody from?
Manchester, I think I saw something like
from
that.
Manchester. Okay,
Yes,
I will be sending you an e-greeting because I don't know how I'm going to send the book to you, but please just reach out and we will engage, and you know, I can have a 1-hour conversation with you on any topic, including cooking agoi beans. So fantastic. Thank you. Anyone else from outside Lagos? Okay, we've seen somebody from Olaide Ojie. Olaide, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us from Port Harcourt. Collins Uweni, thank you very much for joining us from Port Harcourt. Thank you so much for this, and it's nice to see that we have people from outside Lagos and from outside Abuja who are joining this for this conversation. Over to you, Jumoke, as you lead the first panel in the discussion around the topics. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. And it's exciting to know that we have people from various locations within and outside the nation as well as the states. So our first panel conversation. So our first panel conversation will be with Esther Kawe, as well as Dr. Steve Oj. And our focus will be on, we'll be talking about trends that relate to activating the future of work, elevating the focus of human risk, as well as leading in a boundaryless world. So let's get into that. So to start with, I'll be asking our panel members some of this clarification where they can provide insight, right? So my first question will go to Dr. Steve, and I'll say, Dr. Steve, how significantly do your organization consider the impact of this new world of work in shaping overall workplace decision process in our Nigerian context, please? I don't know if you want me to repeat that.
Yes. Okay, I got it. I'll just scribble it. So please confirm you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, so the question is around how significant we look at the impact of the new world of work in terms of how we make decisions in the organization, and more importantly, within the Nigerian context. And the very clear answer is very significant. And if you recall that, of course, the COVID may have triggered it, but if you look around the current economic social conditions in Nigeria, and you begin to actually also understand this a bit more in terms of how people are looking for different ways to be able to do their work. And if you talk about palliative or in kind in terms of how people can work remotely. And so that plays significantly in terms of how we take decisions. Equally very important, if you reflect on, I know when Joe was speaking, he talked about culture. And if you reflect on our national culture, where we are supposed to be largely communalistic as against individualistic, so to say, you think about the fact that we are people who are actually very strong in terms of harmony, in terms of relationships, and that's what makes us work. And if you now need to be able to think about remote way of doing work, so that also plays a part in terms of adapting to remote working versus recognizing the fact that we actually thrive a lot more when we come together, and do things together in a face-to-face format. And so the question is, how do you balance that, and how can you make it work, knowing that the virtual way of work or the new way of work is now the new normal, as it were. As you think about those decisions as well, you reflect on them, because what will make it work from the virtual working format, for example, is good support systems, infrastructures. How can people work from home, for example, effectively when they don't have the required infrastructural support, whether it's about power, whether it's about internet facility, and so on and so forth. And so to answer the question directly, is very significant in the way we look at this, but there are things that are unique to Nigeria's situation, and we put that all that into consideration as we think about how to make it work for all of us. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Steve, for this insight. I'm sure Esther would also like to share some insight before we then ask any other question around activating this future of workplace. Esther, share your insights when it comes to this as it relates to our environment, please.
Thank you very much, Jumoke. Good morning once again, everybody, and to all the panelists. Chizoba, lovely to see you. And then Joseph and everyone. So yes, I would definitely echo what Dr. Steve has mentioned in terms of how significant this is in driving workplace decisions. Shortly before COVID happened, we as an organization had introduced a telecommuting plan, for our people, because they had been asking for it. And then, of course, if you recall, the entire world was a bit reticent about how that was going to happen. Would it impact on productivity? Would it impact on performance? Would people take that as an opportunity to just, have a holiday? So we were experimenting gradually and slowly. And then when COVID happened, we were actually ready because we had put in place the infrastructure, the technology. We had been, experimenting little by little. And then when it became necessary for us to, take that decision, we didn't have a challenge with doing that. And from the COVID time, we realized that This, what Joseph mentioned about worker agency, is absolutely critical. Critical in the sense that gone are the days when organizations sit back and take a decision on behalf of their people without consulting effectively with their people. We now realize that if indeed we play very well in this, future of workplace, which already we're in, it's important for us to keep asking our people what they desire, what their demands are, what their expectations are, and this will infuse into the decisions that we take in the organization, whether it is from the culture, whether it's in terms of the new EVP that we have, rolled out in the last 2 years now to our people, or in terms of the values that we have refreshed, last year coming into this year, all the different decisions that we take as an organization, even to the reward systems, the recognition, how people would like, these personalizations to happen with respect to the people management systems that we have in place. All this we have been able to do because we are mindful of the new ways of working. Jumoke, back to you.
Thank you very much, Esther, for that. I think we'll still continue our conversation around the three and the two others, right? So we can then get back to question. So I'll leave the floor for yourself and Dr. Steve as well, and give us some insights.
If we can ask any questions that we can throw at Dr. Tina, so she can bring the international flavor into this conversation. Thank you.
Hi.
Go ahead, Jumoke, with your questions. Thank you.
Jumoke is muted. Want to continue?
Sorry, trying to unmute. My apologies, right? So my next question, I don't know if Dr. Tina can then help us assist in terms of responding to this and sharing more insights as it relates to your environment and what is happening in this space. What do you think should be the focus of our leaders in activating these hybrid or remote work in their organizations?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jumoke and Chizoba. Just listening to Steve and Esther, it is so clear, that what might appear to be very nuanced emerging trends and evolving practices in Nigerian organizations are actually the same as what's happening across the world. COVID upended the way we see the workplace, for example, and I think the human capital trends are spot on in identifying themes, that have emerged. And really central to that is, oh dear, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Loud and clear.
I'm just seeing a very pink screen, and very central to this, is worker agency. I think of necessity in 2020, if you recall, there was just panic, in my organization at the time, in order to be responsive, to what was going on to the individual, right? There was no point in trying to push, for performance, no, because we didn't know what was going on. So the role of the leader had to completely change. I think for some, for the first time, the focus on the individual was so much higher than it had ever been, before. And I remember at the end of 2020, coming back and people leaders talking about, so how are we assessing performance this year? And the unanimous agreement across all the leaders was, no, we are not. Because this year, everyone did what they were able to do to just show up. Some showed up more, but others couldn't. And it wasn't their fault, because they just couldn't. And what we realized from that point on, is that the relationships had changed. Especially the role of the leader. Whereas I think, and me included, I was very focused on delivery. I was which is still critically important, but very focused on certain traditional norms. We come together, we must meet. This is how we set objectives. And after COVID, the realization that we can't go back. I think that this is universal. The role of the office, for example, is one such place. I'm an office person by nature, and so are a number of people. And we are losing the battle, as with many organizations, to get people to come back to the office. And we have now settled on 3 days in the office and 2 days working from home. And during COVID, we had to set up the home as an office space. And I think there are certain countries, Kenya, for example, which required, that the home be set up as an office, for work to continue. And the role of the leader, is also in how inclusive are you in ensuring, that everyone feels part of the team. I think that has been emphasized even more. I think the inclusion agenda as well is gaining a lot more momentum now than it probably did in the past. And then I think, how are we as leaders championing the use of technology to facilitate hybrid work? I think that has just become center. We had put our technology roadmap somewhere down the road. I think we're going to start in 2024. We've had to prepone that, just so that we can have enabling technology to facilitate how work happens. I would leave the conversation about the interconnectedness. I think with moving from a role-based to a skills-based organization. And I'll take the opportunity at that time to also describe the organization that I work for, the Mastercard Foundation, and how that becomes very contextualized, to the organization. Because in our organization, we hired 80% of our staff during COVID.
Wow.
And just talk about the faith in hiring over 300 people that you haven't met. You see them on Zoom. And this is across all levels in the organization, and then the role of culture. So here we are wanting to embed our values, our behaviors. We had to really transform the way we approached the sourcing process, and implement several gates through which we needed to vet people. Number one, on our values. So that became, front and center. And our leaders had to become, values champions. And so then onboarding people remotely. Our work was so critical during COVID because we had to pivot and really support. How do we then, as leaders, just create agility that has stayed on? I think the opportunities that COVID presented was refreshing how we need to lead the organization. And we'll talk about those practices a bit more, I think during session 2. So I'll stop there. Hand it back to you, Jumoke.
All right, thank you so very much, Doctor. Thank you for that question. Esther, Dr. Steve, would you want to add 1 or 2 things to that before we move to the next?
Yes, so thanks. I mean, that is equally very, very powerful from Tina. And so for me, therefore, is always important as you think about what should drive us as leaders to activate whether it's hybrid or remote work. It's around that recognition that today, just like Joe highlighted in the opening comments, that is not just so much about how work is done, but where it should be done. That is a conversation. And that will also be that which drives decisions. And therefore, as we think about that, you actually also reflect on how we design work itself. Are there work that you can design in a way that it can be done anywhere? Customer service, for example, how can you be a bit more intentional in designing it to drive that mixture, for example? Like I said earlier about the fact that culturally, we are social people in Nigeria who like to interact. People can do things for me because of me, for example. That is because of the personal relationship they have with me. So how can we therefore think about the social side of work in the way that people interact, even though they are still working virtually, and how they connect? The collaboration tools are there, but it's not enough for people to make that connection, just like Tina highlighted as well. And it's equally very important for us to say, how can we adapt the technology that we have? So that in a way that technology complements and make us work a bit better. As you think about AI, there is a concern around the fact that is AI here to take away my job, and my job as well, in terms of our focus, is to say, no, it's just actually to make your job better so that you can make higher level of contribution to our organization. For example, I work for Seplat Energy. Our focus is around, the ESG, for example. What about the environment? What about the social? What about the governance? How does it even affect our carbon footprint, for example, in terms of how it can help us in reducing our office space, presence, as it were? And when you also think about this, I work in an area where we have the powerhouse for the organization in the field location, the frontline workers. So this working from home or virtual working shouldn't only just apply to workers in the office. So what are we activating in terms of our customized work cycle? People have their families abroad. Yes, I might have 14-14 work cycle. If I try to make it 28-28 in the office, in the field location, that people will say, can I be away from my spouse for 28 days in Nigeria, for example? But those who have families abroad will actually want 28 days or even want 35 days. How can I make all this work? And I've actually also seen back in my days in Shell, when I was working in the location, Brunei is in Southeast Asia. We had some of this challenge where even in the frontline locations, we were able to put in place, people can, in an unmanned platform. So technology helping us to manage locations where people cannot be there physically. And in essence, the conversation around virtual working shouldn't only stop in the office. It should actually apply to your frontline workers as well, who are the biggest contributors of value to your business. So I'm with Tina on this to say our focus is not how to stop it. Our focus is how to make it work, recognizing that it is here to stay. That is the new way of work. That is the only way you can attract and keep your talents. And more importantly, that's the only way you can keep your employees really, really engaged at this time that is required more than ever before. So back to you, please.
Thank you so very much, Doctor. While we're waiting to hear from Esther, I think it would be nice to also hear from Franklin as well as Oisa on this. Would like to get your view.
Okay, do I go ahead?
Please do.
Okay. Yes, I think that both Dr. Tina and Dr. Steve have actually done justice to that question. Just to add a little from our experience. And what we realized is that the leader must refrain from adopting a one-size-fits-all approach, even to activating a full remote work model or hybrid work model or full on-site work model. When we were, after COVID, during COVID, we didn't have a choice. Everybody didn't really have a choice because there was a lockdown. We needed to, work fully from home. But when all that had ended and we were transiting into a hybrid work model, we needed to survey our people. We needed to ask our people what they wanted, this worker agency that we're talking about. And we realized that from the survey outcomes, there were individuals who wanted to work fully on site. for all the reasons in the world, that were peculiar to them for wanting to do that. There were individuals who were interested in, full remote, and then there were those who wanted hybrid. Of course, at the end of the day, we settled, for the middle of the ground road, which is the hybrid approach, but it was important and essential for us as leaders in the organization to find out what the people wanted. And I would advise that if there's anyone, any of our participants in your organization, if you are yet to activate a hybrid work model or a full remote work model, whatever you might be thinking of activating right now, the first step as a leader is to find out from your people, and that is personalization. It is critical. And then number two for us was that after we had taken into consideration what people wanted, we needed to also identify the jobs that were amenable to working from home and those that would only be done from the office. For instance, our working center agents, there was no way on earth we could have designed their work to be able to service customers from home. If we're talking about the online, connect centers, yes, fantastic, because it is a call. But when customers would need to go into the stores, you certainly would need to have a physical, presence in the store to be able to attend to them. So it's not all the jobs in our organization that, would be amenable to that. And then thirdly, we realized that training was essential to equip both the people and the leaders to be able to manage effectively, the hybrid work model, and then for our people as well to understand how to comport themselves and collaborate effectively. So we had to develop a playbook, the playbook for employees, the playbook for the leaders. We took them through training programs for the employees and for the leaders. We helped everybody to understand what exactly it means to work from home, how to drive productivity, how to ensure performance, how to focus the leaders on deliverables and outcomes, and not just the hours of work. In fact, there were a few organizations that had registers and stuff in place, and a few people were coming to me to suggest that we could introduce that. And I had to push back, and the rest of the leadership team, we have never, at least for as long as I've been in MTN, had physical registers to be tracking when people come into the organization, because we believe that people can be trusted and they can self-regulate. And so as a result of that, we had to really focus on deliverables. And then what we saw as a challenge was that people were so responsible that they didn't even have that, that work-life balance became blurred. And it had to go into our playbook as well to say, look, respect the boundaries between work and personal life. From a particular time, managers are not allowed to assign tasks, to hold meetings, to have anything called work with their people, so that the well-being that we're prioritizing for our people during that period would also be at the forefront. And that was also very important. Our employees' well-being, their mental resilience, beyond their physical resilience. We introduced so many programs that enabled you, even whilst at home, to conduct, to carry out exercises, aerobics, joining with other people remotely or virtually to be able to do that. And so these are so many, so many strategies we put in place as leaders in the organization to really enable, the work from home, in addition to what Dr. Tina and Dr. Steve also mentioned. Back to you, Jumoke.
Thank you so very much, Esther. I think that we should take a look at the second trend, right, which is fundamental. I think we should take a look at the second trend, which is going to focus on, pardon me, please, elevating the focus on human risk. And I'll still have one or two questions to put out to our panelists, and I'll appreciate if we can get insight from them, as well as having to hear from Franklin and Oisa as well. So I'll ask, when we'll talk about human risk, right, what is the most considered HR issue? How can our leaders ensure that a sense of responsibility of human risk management is effectively ingrained at the board level. Dr. Steve, I don't know if you can initiate that, then we can then have Esther and Franklin and Oisa speak to that as well.
Okay,
Thank
thanks, Jumoke, again. Thanks a lot. Thank you. So, you know, when you think about this, you think around the fact that human risk, again, thankfully, I think Joe has made a very good point in the opening remarks and sharing a bit more light on this. And human risk in the world of work goes beyond what we typically do in HR, where you consider it as HR issue, you begin to track attrition, you begin to track level of compliance, who is leaving us, how does it impact financial and operational impact, you know, and so on and so forth. But more than that, so human risk is more than that, because you begin to see that it equally has impacts on your reputation. If you really want to be in business, you should be concerned around your reputation. You know, you should be concerned around how you perform as a business and how you can be viable in the long term. And therefore, that is what makes it for the board members to take it much more seriously when they know that it has impacts on the long-term viability of the business. And again, Joe made that point around the fact that when you think around human risk, you're thinking about the personal impacts, you know, the political situation, for example, in the country. Today is Wednesday. We know what it means, you know, for Nigeria. So should that interest us, for example, at the board? Yes, it will. The economic conditions as a result of the impact of, for example, the forex situation, the fuel subsidy removal, how is everybody is asking for palliative, it should concern us. So, and therefore, the question is that, you know, so how can we now ingrain it at the board level? So what you do is, you know, so how can we just make sure that in our policies, for example, is right out there in the way we just do our policies to make sure that it's signed off by the board members. Again, more importantly, you actually also see, for example, how can you just make sure that in our own business planning process is actually also there. In the scenario planning that we put in place is also there. It features left, right, and center. And how do I do that? For example, you have our radar screen from time to time where we're able to see these pestle elements. How do we see it emerging in the next 6 months, the next 1 year? What are the mitigations we are putting in place? How does it feature as prominently as an enterprise risk? Because these are actually core enterprise risks that the company needs to be able to track. And it therefore means that I'm able to put this into our own scorecard to the extent that everybody knows that if you do not track this and if you don't address or mitigate this risk, it has impact on what, you know, how our scorecard shapes up at the end of the year. And of course, if it affects the scorecard, it means it also affects the bonus at the end of the year. And also, of course, if it affects the bonus, it affects the stock pricing of our company in the market. More importantly, as we actually quoted both in Nigeria and UK, and these are the ESG elements are actually clear to people in terms of sustainability of your business. So you're actually very, very conscious of it. So and more importantly as well, if you want to make it ingrained, we actually also train them as well, because I mean most of the board members have grown up knowing the other operational risks like I've highlighted. But the human risk is new to everybody to know that it is what can sink or elevate your organization. So you train them to own it, and you train them to be champions of it. And in our own board in the organization, you actually have appointed board members who you say you are the champion of this, you are the champion of that. And that way it becomes an everyday thing that comes up whenever they come together. Just like we take safety and environment important in the organization, in the same way we have elevated human risk at our board level. And I hope in the fullness of time, that helps engrains that habit and culture among all of them. So back to you, Jumoke.
Thank you. Well said, Doctor. Thank you very much for that insight. Franklin, Oisa, would you want to add 1 or 2 things to what Doctor has said?
Okay, good morning, everyone. And Doctor has spoken extensively on that, but just to add a perspective from the industry in which I operate, financial services, obviously we're highly regulated. So the same way we look at operational risks, we look at fraud risks, cyber risks, human risk is also something that has full attention. at the board level and cascading all the way down. So one of the things that we do is to ensure that all of our risks are properly identified in a risk register with what all the possible mitigations or scenarios are around the potential of this happening. Because like Joseph even mentioned, I mean, it's beyond attrition, succession risk and all of that. Reputation is key. And in the world where we live in today, where social media, we know what it can do, right? So there's also the potential around that where, you know, things get to the point where even from a reputational perspective, you're left to the court of public opinion, right? So those are some of the things that really we pay a lot of attention to across the organization. And we do have committees around risk that also look at human risk as well as the other ones. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raisa, for that insight. Franklin, Dr. Tina, Esther, would you want to add to that?
Okay. Hi, Jumoke. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly, Franklin. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, I mean, considering the fact that the audience is mixed, I will attempt not to speak from an InterSuite standpoint, because I imagine that what may be easy to implement for technology or telecom, having worked in a manufacturing company, the realities may play out differently. So I would answer the question a bit differently and more general in a way that, you know, we can apply to different industries. So the way we have looked at risk or human risk and how we prioritize this is to dimension it into different levers. So we must recognize the risk to self. And I'll explain very quickly. There's the risk to the organization. There's the risk to the job itself. And I think Oiza, you know, societal risk as well. It's very important to recognize the fact that in the view or in the light of employee behavior changing, there are potential risks because when people want to just have all what they want, I mean, you can be rest assured that they may not have the full scope or full knowledge of how far that can go and how it has impact. The famous example we use in this conversation is COVID. We saw that COVID liberated a lot of vices as much as we saw the positive side to it. So while a lot of people enjoy the harmonization of work-life balance, we also saw a spike in mental issues. People couldn't interact. People were within the shores of their homes. They couldn't go out. You know, they enjoy the not commuting to work and working from home, but mental issues spiked. If you have EAP in your organization and you're tracking the statistics, I'm sure this won't be news to you. So we have recognized that there's also risk to self. Sometimes what employees think is good for them is not necessarily what is good for them. So we have identified a few and try to use that to reinforce our wellness program, capturing all the respective dimensions. There's risk to the job and risk to the organization. Again, because this is not our session, I'll try to keep it very short. We have seen that while people can be trusted, there's also the challenge of people now doing multiple jobs. And that's a risk in itself to the job and to the organization. Again, like I said, the first point, to the employees themselves. Now there's fatigue, customers are suffering, revenue is suffering. So we have looked at this risk in different dimensions. Societal risk is, I mean, the ones driven by a lot of, you know, government policies and, you know, as we say in politics as well. And what we've tried to do is to bring all that into the right governance framework where we then track, for us as InterSuite, terminology for some of this risk. Some of them are called traps for us. So we, on a regular basis, keep an eye on them, report on them. We have interventions that we are following through from time to time to ensure that we are progressive in our campaign for mitigating some of this risk. Again, I'm trying not to go into the conversation of how do we bring it to the board, again, because this may take some time. So maybe, Jumoke, I'll just yield the floor to you. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Franklin. I was just going to ask the panel member to also support in terms of how best can this be cascaded, right? And if you can just support with few examples of this human capital or people risk, as we have called it, right? Human risk. Dr. Tina, Esther, I don't know if you can help us with quick conversation on this, please.
Okay, I mean, I can actually start. And I think the other thing I wanted to add to what was said earlier about elevating it to the board level that perhaps we might not have mentioned, even though I agree with everything that has been said, is the fact that even when the board holds its retreat, there has to be an element of the retreat on the agenda that is focused on discussing human risks, because all of the different risks that are available in the organization, whether strategic, whether competitive, whether operational, all of the different business risks have human risks ingrained in them. And so when you have, even though there's already a board committee that is looking at that, discussions are being held and, reports are being done. When the retreats are being done, it is important that this is an agenda on its own. And if that is not happening in some of our organizations, then I think it is our responsibility as the head of HR in, that company to elevate it. And then that now dovetails into cascading to the rest of the organization, which Dr. Steve already mentioned in terms of the training programs that would happen. But beyond the training is the KPIs. So we have, these elements of people risks in people's KPIs. And that is also one of the ways of elevating it to the consciousness of everybody in the organization to understand that your role, your actions and your contributions in the organization go a long way to assisting and supporting the achievement of the company's goals or otherwise. And so that is one way that is done. Another is through the roadshows that are done on a regular basis, devoted to risk discussions. All of the different risks. How can you mitigate it? What is your role in perpetuating it or in making sure that it is mitigated? And that way, I think that we can, keeping it short, we can actually cascade this throughout the entire organization.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
It looks like we have just 4 more minutes before we bring in the conversation from the audience so that they can be part of this conversation. And so we just have 3 minutes for the panelists to wrap up this conversation as we move into the next stage, which is bringing on the audience and taking the questions from the Q&A.
All right, thank you very much for that, Chizoba. I think we'll just use the last 4 minutes to have a quick conversation on leading a boundaryless world. And Dr. Tina, I knew you were about to say something, but if you can help us on this, what are the ultimate hallmarks of a leader in the boundaryless world?
I think the capabilities of leaders are absolutely shifting. And I think if we can just take it from the top of the, right from the strategy level, and so strategy level and implications, especially on people. How is a leader able to translate, right, the strategies that they are setting into what are the capabilities that are needed, right? And once that has been done, how is a leader then able to find those capabilities? And I think, as we know, the world is shifting from just focusing on, here are the roles and I need full-time people to do this work. How else can you get the work done? I think that this is the true definition of working outside the boundaries. So, you know, I think the classical models, you know, full-time employment, you know, contract work, we're talking about gig workers. I think that we extend that to include what we call residents. And these are people with particular skill sets that we need for a particular time who might be employed elsewhere, right? But for a period, we ask them to come and join us. And then we have an arrangement with the organization where they're coming from, where we can borrow. This is about borrowing the talent, you know. And then also our ecosystem is also made up of our partners through whom we do our work. And I think in FMCG organizations, you also have you know, those third parties, you know, through whom you sell your products. How do you grow that ecosystem in a way that delivers most efficiently, and you get better at managing the pipeline of the resources that are needed? So that's one side of how the leader needs to evolve how they work. And then I think the next part is around, and we've spoken at length about this, the relationship between leaders and their teams and the individuals. I think we spoke about risk. We're talking about risk. What we find is the biggest risk, you know, is that our values, the culture that we have, is so key to us being successful, to putting young people into work. And so therefore the risk comes when people do not understand our values, the behaviors associated with our values, and how we deliver the work that we do. We see that is the biggest risk, and we spend a lot of time in this area. I'll stop there and give others a chance to speak.
All right, thank you very much, Doctor. I think that was helpful. Thank you for that response. We will be wrapping up. Shizaba, are you saying something?
No, I was just saying that there are a few questions around the activating the workplace of the future. And it looks like that's what's resonating with the participants and the audience here. There is a specific question around how do you implement remote work in a manufacturing company where people have to be physically available to work on machines? And how do you galvanize the workforce partitioned into skilled, semi, and unskilled when the skilled workforce in support functions are clamoring for remote? So I don't know, Jumoke, who's going to answer this question for us?
All right, thank you. Dr. Steve, I'm sure you would like to guide us on this response. Thank you.
I mean, I think in terms of how we have situated this earlier, this whole the future world of work is not a one-shoe-fits-all scenario. I think Esther actually also made a point in terms of the fact that the way you design work, you know, is almost is mandated that certain people need to be in the office, for example. And so for us, as like I highlighted, so we've seen situations where when you make a bit of the work a bit more automated, you know, so control can be done in so many other places. So I've seen some of the things we do. There's what we call EWIMS, you know, electronic wealth integrity management. So in the past, you would think about the fact that integrity management will require you to be on site, for example. So the way it's now been done is that people can be at home, you know, design it, and they still monitor the integrity of our wells and the pipelines, you know, working out there. And like I said as well, is that there will be a situation where you know that some of these frontline workers, they may not require, you know, the remote work might not be the right intervention that you need to make for them, but they will benefit from a bit more of customized work cycle. will work in 28 days, 28 days on, 28 days off, will it benefit them? 14 days on, 14 days off, will it benefit them? Even 35 days on, 35 days off, will it benefit them in terms of their being able to also connect, have time for their families and balance their work and their life a bit more? So it's not a one-stop, a one-shoe-fit-all situation, but it's a bit of trying to understand your workers and say, how can you best meet them while also recognizing that there is a business to run. But what you cannot do is a situation whereby the models we are putting in place is only limited to the head office and not for those who help you deliver value in the front line. And that is the area where we need to think a bit more, understanding our business. Part of our job as HR now is to understand our business a bit more, understand the architecture that drive it, and looking at technology that's all around. We can now find the best place to be able to meet those needs. So it's again about understanding the market and finding what can work under your own specific unique circumstance. Back to you, Supreme. Okay.
Thank you so very much, Doctor, for that response. So my next question, I have another question that says,
okay. I think China is itching to say something.
Okay. Please go ahead.
I think Dr. Steve answered it 100%. It's not possible, that all segments of a workforce, can work remotely. Others are going to need to be at work, and then there's going to be flexibility around some roles. I think the challenge for management then becomes, then how do you maintain equity? And now I think, again, this is the changing role of the leadership. So what I think this was also what Dr. Steve was saying, what incentives and initiatives are put in place for the workers that have to be, at station, so that they are motivated and they don't feel penalized, unintended consequences of addressing the people that can work remotely. Someone asked a question about compensation and hybrid work. I think, unfortunately, legislation across many jurisdictions is not going to allow you, to make any changes to compensation, especially if it's going to negatively impact staff, and so maintaining that status quo, but providing an enabling environment, for people to be able to work remotely. Then I think this is, I'm gathering what Esther and MTN do really, really well. How do you continue, to ensure that it is still one culture? One of the dangers that we are seeing, is that fragmentation is so easy now because of remote working and hybrid work. If you see the trends in the US, where a lot of these big organizations, tech organizations, and maybe Franklin can shed more light, are asking people to come back to work full time. They were the champions of making people work remotely and work anyway, but they are saying, come back to work. So there is pain that is being felt. And so how does an organization ensure that the culture remains one, and the belief that culture makes or breaks and eats strategy for breakfast, as they say? I think that is the leadership challenge, and there are many ways to address that, but I'll let the others also chip in and we can talk about it later.
Okay, Jim, can I say something very quickly, just for our conversation? All right. So I think it's important we prioritize the real problem. First, I'd like to say that the future of work is not remote. It is hybrid. So we must find a way to contain the clamor for full remote. And I do have multiple data points to support this. The future of work is not remote. We must recognize and appreciate the fact that work is designed to function efficiently in a certain way. Now, whether we call it job or work, and that's a law in nature. There are some things we can't change. What some people will call old tradition, it stays. Those principles can't change. It is what it is, right? we must evolve with change, but there's certain things that needs to grow with us and evolve with us in change. But back to the point around putting the problem statement in perspective. Why are people asking for remote work? Why are people asking for full-time, remote, or why are they asking for hybrid? I think we need to investigate and solve that problem, because that's the real issue. People are asking for remote in some organization because of the burden of commuting to work. Some people are asking for remote because they want to have time to be able to do their school runs with their kids, pick up and drop off, and relieve the stress. Some people are asking because of mental stress. For some people, it's the convenience. So those are the real issues, right? If you are able to, or if we are able to, and I really like some of the points highlighted in the trend, framing the challenges. I think we haven't done a lot of work in validating our hypothesis, our understanding of what the problem is, researching and investigating what the problem is. If I have, a workforce that's whether white or blue collar, and they are supposed to be in front of the production line and churning out products, and they live like 4 hours away from my factory, and I'm able to say, guys, I now have a temporary residence for you where you don't need to commute. People will be happy to come to work every day. I know Facebook tried to build Facebook town or Facebook village. So the challenge I have with how we've practiced HR in some of these industries is the fact that we interpret the problem statement differently. We try to apply global practices as is without customizing it bespoke to how the problem impacts us. And I think that's something we need to begin to do differently. The way the problems are playing out globally will remain. How it's affecting your organization and the talents within your organization is something you must go further to investigate. Now, in providing intervention, which is one thing Joseph talked about, designing for impact, and I think is very spot on. You now need to design your intervention for impact, hitting the actual problem and not the symptoms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franklin. Thank you. So I'll just
Jumoke to respond to some of these issues, but I think I would let it pass since we are moderating the session. We just have I think 5 more minutes. 8 more minutes, and so we will only be able to take maybe one question so that the panelists can also just chip in on that. Thank you.
All right. So I think we'll just take one more question, like Chizoba said, and the question I have here says, how has the post-pandemic workplace influenced employee expectations, and how does your organization align its employee value proposition, that's our EVP, to meeting challenging needs? So I'm sure Esther can help us, and other panelists can then also provide their thoughts.
Thank you very much for that question. Okay, so I must have mentioned it earlier, and I would reiterate it, that post the pandemic, employees, our people, because we surveyed them, we didn't, this thinking like a researcher, we made sure that we engaged with the people to co-create, the solutions that we eventually implemented. We wanted to find out what they were interested in, what their expectations were. And we discovered that their expectations at the end of the day, when we boiled, all of the feedback down to a single solution, was to have a hybrid, work model in place in the organization, which is what we have implemented. So now we do 3 days a week in the office and 2 days at work. And it is, not even the same day for everybody in the organization. Every division also has the right to select the days that they want to be in the office and the days that they do not want to be in the office, so that also works for Culture, Dr. Titina talked about how do you ensure that the culture is one. That was one critical area that, we needed to fix, not to lose sight of the collaboration, the social interaction, fostering the right culture, ensuring that everybody is on the same page in the organization, being able to communicate effectively and, hold engagement sessions effectively with the people. So we then decided that, look, it would be best if, divisions were able to come together, and they selected the days, in which they would come in. And so post the pandemic, this is one clear expectation. And that has opened the minds and eyes of our people to realize that there are so many other decision points in the organization that they can support in co-creating, and they are asking. Our people are not shy of asking. So whether it's in terms of remuneration, in terms of the kinds of benefits that they would like to have in place in the company, how these benefits should be personalized, whether it is in terms of, the kinds of engagement schemes they would want in place. We are currently going through a cultural transformation program in the organization, and they are a central part of that, effort that we're leading. And they're, making their views and demands known to the organization. So really, post the pandemic, worker agency has really taken, it has been on an upward drive, and we are meeting it, head on as well. And we then realize that it's actually, very useful for even us, the leaders, to have our people become a part of the decisions that are being taken, so that we can own these decisions jointly. It's no longer, us versus them. The leadership said it is now all of us have decided, to go in this direction, and that's what indeed we're doing. I'm not sure if that was all of the question you asked me, but that's the part that I remember, Jumoke. Did I miss out anything else in the question?
Yeah,
Sorry, Joker, you did Esther, but I think there's a question that is specifically for MTN.
Okay.
You actually you spoke to that question, but I think it'd be nice to just Joker, you can just check. And the person asking us for Esther particularly, so maybe you could just take 1 minute to respond to that, Esther.
Okay. Let's see if I can see the question.
I think the question was about how you were managing, that you did say that you do not track the time that people come into work,
Exactly. Said I'm interested.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Precisely. Because, as far as we're concerned, it's all about trust. And I also said that it is about focus on the deliverables, on work deliverables, as against the number of hours that you work. Honestly, on the days that you work from home, I don't care if, you do not do your hygiene, whatever you need to do the entire day. I really do not care whether you're working inside your bedroom or in your study or in the kitchen. What is important is the deliverables that I have, assigned to you and that I'm expecting on that particular day. And of course, obviously, that sense of responsibility that our people are known for, which is that if there's a meeting fixed for a particular time, despite the fact that you're working from home, the expectation is that you'll be available, to do that meeting and be present in the meeting and contribute effectively. So if you're meeting your KPIs, your work deliverables, productivity is not tanking, you're available to collaborate with your colleagues and to do all of the different things that have been assigned to you, then that is okay. That is all well and good for us. And then when you come to the office as well, don't forget that I said, or maybe I didn't mention it, that even before COVID proper, we had started experimenting with telecommuting, and not just telecommuting, all of the flexible work arrangements, which means that we had a situation whereby people could actually stagger their resumption time and their closing time. So we had people coming in at 7 up until 10 a.m. and then you could start closing from about 3 or 4 up until, like 7 p.m. And people could select any of the times that they wanted to come in. How do you track attendance with, such a system? It's still all about you are a responsible adult. We expect you to self-regulate. We expect you to be accountable. Do what you're supposed to do. And if that is not done, it's reflected in your appraisal at the end of the day. But I can assure you that most of our people actually make sure that they're responsible. I hope that helps.
Absolutely.
I'm not allowed to comment, so Esther, I hope so too.
I guess you can.
But that was great. No, I mean,
thank you very much. Thank you very much. It appears that the hybrid remote work, the future of the workplace, is an issue that is resonating with people. And we're seeing all sorts of questions around it. My organization doesn't want me to do it. How do we do it? How do we manage a group of staff feeling left out? The bottom line is these are conversations that must be had in the organization. There are many things that were off the table before, but these are organizations. And so if you are a human resources leader, these are conversations that you must continue to have with your leadership. It is no longer a nice to have. It is now a critical element of the value proposition, the employee value proposition. And as more organizations, as you're trying to hire people, talking to a client, they are having difficulty hiring people because people don't want to go into the office 5 days a week. So it is becoming something that we need to discuss. I was a little unsettled when Franklin started, when he said, you cannot be all remote. I said, it depends on the business. It depends on the work that needs to be done. There are organizations that are fully remote and there are organizations that are hybrid. Every organization needs to sit down and have a conversation. And based on the trends that we're seeing, everything has to be designed around the work. The work comes center stage. And when you really think about the work, it's not about the jobs, it's about the outcomes that are required. And then what is required to produce those outcomes. Then we can then now talk about the kinds of skills that we require, where that work can be done, and the technology that will support that work being done. And as technology is evolving, we're beginning to see more and more that there is nothing that cannot be done remotely based on the trends. And when you do read the trends, there are experiments that organizations are doing. BMW is experimenting with the metaverse, using augmented reality and artificial intelligence and virtual reality to actually fine-tune remotely their operating lines. So there is a lot over the next 10 years. Maybe we will even be talking about, should people really come to work? But essentially what we're seeing also from the report that we have read from the trends is that we still need, as we go remote, there is still a need for people to have that human interaction and connection. And what we need to start doing is to be very deliberate about those interventions and their interactions. And for those who are working in manufacturing, every time I hear that, then I realize that we haven't moved into gig work. And we need to start thinking about how do we organize our manufacturing work in such a way that we grow an ecosystem of both those who we considered internal before and external. And then it frees us, because there's nothing that says I must work 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week. What if I want to work 15 hours a week? What if I want to work 20 hours a week? Those are conversations that we have to have in the organization. Thank you so much to our panelists for doing justice to that. We will go into a second phase in a few minutes where Jumoke and I will continue the conversation with the panelists. And this time we'll be discussing unlocking the workforce ecosystem. That is those who are both internal to us and those vendors, contractors, gig workers, consultants that we consider external. And then we talk a bit more about the harnessing the worker agency, the voice of the workers in the work that needs to be done on those things that were considered untouchable and that the workers couldn't discuss. And we will explore more on the future of the workplace, but we will start with harnessing the worker agency and the workforce ecosystem. Thank you very much for an exciting morning. We're just going to quickly, this is the 10th year of the Human Capital Trends, the Deloitte Human Capital Trends, and I'm very excited, for us to look at the trends over the years and the kinds of conversations that sparked up for us in Nigeria. So if we can have the human capital trends. over the years, so that we can, have the conversation around what it was in 2017 to 2018, 2019, 2020, and right now in 2023. And you'll see that, there's been a progression. And if we have been following the trends, by next year, we should be thinking about what some of the things that are possible. Because in 2017, it was about rewriting the rules in the digital age. And that was just the beginning of the conversations around the future of work and what was going to be center stage, around the work that we all do. And in 2018, we found out, the rise of the social enterprise, and that was that employees cared more, were beginning to care more about the things that were happening, the ESGs, the economic sustainability and governance issues, much more than they were before. And you could see that it was beginning of the rise of, the millennials, the Gen Zs, and, we're beginning to see a trend towards, I will work for an organization that is responsible, rather than, organizations that are just focused on the profit. And towards that social enterprise, 2019 was about, we need to lead this social enterprise. So we need to move away from the, where the CFOs were the ones who were calling the shots, around the profit after taxation, what they call it, all the nice to have financial terms, to the point where we needed to have organizations, to lead organizations that have a purpose, and organizations, that were driving, shaping the social impact, their social impact and their social footprints, within the global scene. In 2020, we looked at the social enterprise at work, and it was weird that, that was right in the middle of COVID. And then we were talking about the three things that were changing the world of work. And we're talking about the work itself was being technologically enabled, talking about the disaggregation of the workplace while we're all sitting at home and working, and then talking about the rise of the new workforce ecosystem. That was very great. We talked about possibilities, potentials of these different things that we could do, and also talked about we talked about the compensation conundrum. So if all these things are changing, then compensation then needs to follow the trends that we were seeing. And in 2021, social enterprise still taking center stage, this was shifting from surviving to thriving. And you will see that, even within this, within the 2023 trend, you will see things like, how do we survive? How do we drive? And then how do we thrive? And that's the conversation that we had. So having disrupted the world, these social enterprises that we have disrupted the work that's done, the workplace and the workforce. How do we lead the shift from trying to catch up with the things that are happening to us to staying ahead of the curve and thriving in a disrupted world? And with these new fundamentals of boundaryless, we also, it's a step forward in terms of, if you've got to think like a researcher, here are problems that, so you have to actually, like Franklin also rightly pointed out, think about all the scenarios, think about all the problems that we can have. How can we thrive, or how can we survive anything that gets thrown at us? And that means that, we need to, like the report says, unpack that work. Unpack that work. Every single thing is around what needs to be done, what are the outcomes. So over the last 6 years, it's been an exciting times in this social enterprise, and now the new world is the boundaryless world, where there are no boundaries in terms of who is in, who is out, where work is done, and then the kinds of technology that connects us in the work. So we will be moving on very quickly to our second panel. And in this second panel, like I did say, our questions will be around the worker agency and the unlocking the workforce ecosystem. So my first question will go to Oyiza. Oiza, how can organizations in Nigeria develop workforce strategies that effectively address the unique needs and contributions of the different kinds of worker types, including our full-time employees, our gig workers, and our contractors? What are your thoughts, around how that should happen?
Okay, thank you very much, Chizoba. Before I sort of respond to that, I know in the intro you referred to me as your cousin, so just to bring home this conversation and sort of in a very easy way, sort of focus on what we're talking about. Chizoba, my cousin, right, is a gig worker. Deloitte, as well as other companies, are able to leverage the critical skills that she has and use her unique contributions to their advantage, while also ensuring that she gains, her own, what she wants out of the entire relationship. So for organizations in Nigeria, I think the first thing, I think it was Steve who spoke about, some of our cultural nuances as a country, right? I think we need to sort of change our mindset around this whole, who is really my worker, right? And is my worker really only someone who is within my organization, employed, who you give an offer letter, who you said your time from 8 to 5, belongs to me and all of that. And begin to think about, what our business strategy really is, right? What kinds of outcomes do we want delivered? And, what skills we will require? What are the capabilities we require? If we start to look at things in that context, then we won't be so hung up with, you must be a core employee, I must have all of your time. Because what I'm seeing increasingly, and just having over the years done a couple of, being part of interviewing new hires, engaging, looking at different CVs. And in more recent times, I'm beginning to come across individuals who, in one person's CV, you'll see today they were a core employee here, tomorrow they were on a contract somewhere else. The day after, they are telling you, well, I work for so company, but I also consult for so company, right? And I'm sure a couple of years ago, once you were, in front of that type of candidate, you start thinking, this person, you can't work for me. But you see, all of that is changing. So we need to begin to see different workers as an integral part of our organizations, right? And so in terms of even our workforce strategies and plans, we need to take this into consideration. In the industry where I operate, obviously we have a large contingent workforce, and predominantly in our front line. But the question is, would the typical organization sort of say, oh yes, this is, really my workforce? You hear all sorts of terminologies. Oh, this person is outsourced, vendor outsourced, and all of that. Forgetting that really, at the end of the day, individuals who, whether by virtue of the employment types, whether they are with you permanently, whether they're even your contractors, sort of contribute to you achieving your objectives. And it's also for organizations, we need to start looking at how we can integrate the different worker types into our culture, right? Because you can't say you want to focus, my organization, for instance, we're going through an entire cultural transformation journey, but it will be foolhardy to sort of say you're going to only focus on your core employees. Guess what? Everybody who has some sort of impact on your business, right, affects how you achieve your business objectives, or how you're perceived, whether by your customers, your stakeholders, etc. So we need to begin to integrate the different worker types in terms of the core values of the organization, and giving people a sense of belonging, right? So it has to be, and we have to start promoting inclusiveness in the way we operate. Another thing I would like to sort of focus on around that for organizations in Nigeria, sort of harnessing the potential of the workforce ecosystem, would be for us to start looking beyond jobs, right? And I think that Joseph even spoke about it, and I think Tina also sort of mentioned it, to what skills do we require, right? So having a more skills-based approach in sort of how we source for individuals within our businesses and to support us. So I'll just leave that, here for now, so that my other panelists can sort of contribute, and then we'll pick it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oiza. You hit a few sweet spots based on the 2023 report. Let me bring on Franklin. Franklin, if you could have a conversation with me about, how do you think that this is going to play out, for your industry in terms of the worker ecosystem? How is that playing out for your industry?
Hey, just to confirm, you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Let me shout out to Oiza. Growing up on this journey, I mean, I think she's used to be one of those guys we used to gossip about. It's really nice to be here with you on this panel. I remember there was a time I was really looking forward to working with you at some point in my career. I mean, so seeing that you're on this panel, really exciting. Thank you for all the good work that you did.
Nice thing that the ecosystem allows you in
I'm
future
blushing.
to partner and collaborate.
Really, really nice to be here with you. Again, thank you for the good work at GT. Heard so much about you. Really nice to see you here on this platform. So how is this playing out in our industry? As you would imagine, I mean, the industry where we currently play is the most disruptive. This conversation has been ongoing for a long time. The reason why is it hasn't fully materialized because of resistance from a lot of organizations. We have tried to be proactive. Two things we've done is to redefine what we call talent. Boyza touched on it, the concept of access to talent and owning talent. Again, the world has moved from, this is my property to I need to access certain capability. But the journey starts from, again, because this is a large group and it's not really about tech, important to chip this in. You need to identify your talent needs based on the strategy of your organization. So it's not sufficient to say because you've attended this forum, you now want to create a strategy that is inclusive, that can increase the scope of your workforce ecosystem. For you, it may not even be relevant at this time. So again, it's to start with what's the strategy of your organization and what are the talent needs. If you are in agriculture, so the FMCG I worked with, we had diverse industry from oil and gas to agriculture to pharmaceutical. So if your farm is somewhere in Ibadan, and what you need is people coming to work, in your farms. Again, this strategy, as we speak today, may not be something you should bother about. So again, identifying your needs for your business is very crucial. For some of us, you will find that some of the talents you need to deliver on your strategy are not people who are ready to come and tie their destiny with you. There are people that you obviously need their talent because it's not even available. A lot of things are new in our industry. For a lot of this conversation, I dare say that InterSwitch is even one of the pioneers of some of these platform strategies and initiatives. So you don't even have some of these talents available again. So you definitely you'll be compelled to leverage on these things. So we've redefined what talent means to us. We've redefined what work means to us. I'm not sure if it was Esther or Fee or Tina that mentioned that the concept of 9 to 5 is not a theme when you speak about, workforce, the new workforce ecosystem. It's not a theme. The type of contracting we have explored at InterSwitch. So one of the things we did differently was we did a new framework for work model. So we have different work models now. You may have seen some of it on LinkedIn that we put out there. What I said to, I think it was Joseph or Chizoba yesterday, was we have created an inclusive work model strategy, one that creates room, right? If you want to work with us for a week, come. We have we have provision for you. And like Tina said, we'll define your deliverables. At the end of the day, you'll be assessed. So if you come to InterSwitch today, you'll find different types of contracts. It's a lot of work for HR. We are working to enable this with technology. So very, very simple. If you want to be futuristic, you need to create an inclusive work model strategy. Your manpower plan would have to take a different approach given the new phase that we're in. So now you need to plan for compensation for your gig guys. You need to plan for how you want to incentivize them, etc. So again, pretty much, and for a lot of this conversation, we are sort of leading. We're checking what our competitors are doing as well, to see how we can also leverage and harmonize. But for the most part, this is how we are, and it's working pretty well for us. We launched an intervention called Back to the Switch. So it means that even if you leave InterSwitch today and want to work for Deloitte, you can still work for InterSwitch. Because we need your capability. So, but of course, you must leave on a good note, just to include that clause. Thank you, Chizoba. It's back to you.
Thank you so much. I gleaned a lot from your conversation with Oiza, but I'm just going to point out something that you said, that you have different workforce models. And it just reminds me of when Deloitte, one of the trends was work as fashion. You know, you've got to tailor things, you know, to meet the your needs, and the organization and the work comes center stage. So I'm going to move the conversation a little more to Dr. OJ, and this is about the Japa syndrome. So how do we take advantage of the Japa trend within, you know, using this new workforce ecosystem? How can we turn it from what it is, a conversation around the disadvantage, into, you know, harnessing the potential of that trend? So Dr. J, if you're here.
So thanks, I'm here. So that is a difficult one. It's kind of a conundrum in a sense. And that is now that, for example, where we need to design work for it to work, the challenge, for example, sometimes is around some other considerations. For example, somebody is japaring to Canada. So what does, and the person needs to still continue to work for you from Canada. So what does that mean in terms of tax? What does that mean in terms of insurance? What does that mean in terms of so many other considerations? You know, but where you can get all that right, and your work design allows you to do it, there is still some kind of japa you can do, you can entertain, where even your normal customized work cycle in Nigeria can accommodate. You know, so if you can't have some situations where people decide to migrate to Canada or US, and you know, your normal work cycle, whether it's 28, 28 or 35, 35, still enables you to keep the person working for you. Of course, having taken control, or having able to address the issue I raised around jurisdictional exposures, whether it's tax or other considerations. But having said that as well, so we actually also seen that in the early days, those who have japad, who were given leave of absence or study leave, you actually just realize that for some of them, all they needed is some level of time to mark their time in those countries, and they are back to you again. So how are we designing our policy? I think Frank made that point, that even when you leave us, we're still able to open our roads to enable you come back. And I see that happening, that the number of people who have left us or in some kind of leave of absence a few years ago haven't met the residency requirements in those countries, are having to come back. And why? Because we've actually also, they actually also see that there are certain designs around our other EVPs that enable them to know that their working career, their career back in Seplat, for example, is richer or even compares favorably with what they will see externally. So one is around the EVP that we have locally that will know that is in any standard is world class, and they can see that whatever they see there, they can come back and know that so they're actually better off working for us than getting a new employment there. But that they actually also can see that we have designed our policy framework that enable them to know that even when they leave, there is still time for them to know that there is a road for them to come back to us. But again, there are also personal obligations on their parts to say where there are jurisdictional exposures, how are they able to deal with that so that it doesn't come back to haunt us again in terms of what it means to our own impact, reputation as Seplat, for example, when there are personal tax obligations for you in Canada, for which it becomes our own responsibility. So it's one journey where we have all started at once. Nobody is perfect in that journey. But again, based on the theme of this, where we are all researchers, we are learning as we just move along, seeing that for the core or the people who we need, we're able to accommodate them in a way that even when there's Japan, they actually come back better than they left us. And because they have actually gained new skills, they are coming back to us better than the way they left us a few years ago, and everybody's winning. So today, it looks like we're not doing badly as an organization. We're just about 4% attrition rate. And I'm actually also seeing that the trend for people to come back and join us is still, is working, even though it still makes them better than where they were separately, before. But again, recognizing that the challenges that we face, there will be times when we know that is a no-no because it's not just working for both sides, and that we can let go. So it's again, like I started, it's almost like a conundrum in some sense. It's not a perfect model yet, but I think we're not doing badly at the moment. Back to you, Chizoba.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad that you raised the issue around all the considerations, for as we move into the larger workforce ecosystem rather than the employment. And I like how Oiza said it, who is an employee? And that maybe over the next 5 years, we would have found a new name for all these people who add value to us. But in adding value to us, there are things around taxation, there are things, legal jurisdiction that we need to worry about. So I'm going to bring Tina on to have a conversation with us about how you have managed these conundrum in terms of having people in diverse workplaces, and how that has played out for you in terms of all the legal frameworks, for global work. I know that you did mention that you hired most of your staff around
30%.
And from different countries that they are sitting in. So how has that played out for you?
Yeah, so I think, thank you so much. That is such an important conversation, and it continues to be work in progress. In 2020, I think the world of what are called employers of record, right? EORs was very, very small and less mature. So who are these people? I think these are people that facilitate employing people in a different jurisdiction where you don't have a presence. We currently have a presence in 8 organizations, but through EORs, they are called, we are able to employ people in many other countries, than where we are able to pay someone, tax someone, and where we are legally registered. So currently, I think our staff base is spread across 15 countries. And we are only registered in 8 countries. And this is throughout the world, including, a very faraway country. I forget what the name is. So in 2020, it wasn't very mature and it was very difficult, to find a way to employ people in all of those places. In 2020, we also allowed our staff to go home, go home wherever home was. So I'm Zimbabwean and I work in Rwanda, right? And then we have an office in Canada, but we had Australians, we have people from India, from Europe, and we were able to move them, get them the tax advice that they needed to have, and get, in some cases, the employer of record to come in, employ them, and then second them to the foundation. So that was one way that we managed to get around the legalities of doing that. But you can't escape, you know, especially the taxation, the labor laws, you know, that apply to different countries. And so I think I wanted to bring in all of this conversation today, how the role of human resources is also evolving. And the importance, once again, all over again, of having HR sitting at the top table, as they call it. You know, I think that we need to be there to listen in, sometimes to understand where is the business going now and in the future. Because very soon after a strategy is set and established, all roads lead to HR. And one of my frustrations, I think Franklin was telling us some of his, you know, has always been how we are left behind in those conversations. And so to really understand that this is an emerging threat to the world, COVID, how do I, as the HR professional, how am I going to lead the organization in this way? That's the only way that you can anticipate problems. That's how you can anticipate issues. And coming full circle now to talking about skills, you know, being a skills-based organization. This is so exciting. But it's also extremely new to most of us. We know to hire for roles, there is a box, and we need to put someone in this box, no matter what. You know, when we talk about strategy, the work needs to end up in a box. And it's a journey, you know, and we, whether we like it or not, we can see, we can read the tea leaves, and we know we have to go skills-based. And what's happening in our organization now is that we are currently going through an organization review, right? And through that, we can already see new capabilities that are needed. We are going to get so much better at entrepreneurship. We need to get so much better at financing. And we can also see some of the today capabilities that are needed in the organization. So like I said, our organization, I think the added complexity is that we are a new organization. So we are not as mature as probably some of your organizations. And we don't have systems in place where we can tap a button and we can see what skills people have in the organization. We also have an extremely strong employer brand, you know, and so people join us. Sometimes they will come into a role where their skills are needed, but where they are not necessarily leveraging all of their skills. So it's parallel to the process, the top-down process of reviewing our strategies and the capabilities. We are conducting a skills audit. We want to understand what are those skills, because we hired for roles, I'll be honest with you. Now we want to understand what are those skills. And I think they talk about the quiet hiring that is going on. And we are shifting from a primarily buy strategy to a more boost strategy. We are not big on build because of the nature of our work. We do need to be able to serve the young people that we need to put into work. And so that requires that we have the skills to do the work, you know, that we have. But what we are finding, you know, is that as we focus more on talking about what are the skills and capabilities that are needed, and only focus on that, forget about qualifications, forget about hierarchy, and so on, people are putting their hands up in ways that we didn't expect. That is almost counterintuitive to how people think about progressing within the organization. People are putting their hands up. To date, since March, we have what we call boosted 90 people internally, you know, through just matching skills to work that has to happen. We are not calling it out and saying we are all the boxes down. We haven't, you know. I think that requires a lot of change management, and we need to courage, you know, to go there and make it official. But I think this is an important conversation for us as HR professionals to really contribute and to lead the organization in a particular direction. Now, talk about, I think, the different challenges. One of the challenges was, as we were establishing our employer value proposition to our staff, our people philosophy is that our people are empowered to make decisions themselves, their lives, and how they are held accountable for work. So we translate to our practices. So we, as much as possible, create ways in which people can decide part of their compensation and what they compensation for. So we created what we call Benefits My Way. We call it BMW. And where there is a pot of money and you are able to use it for children's education and just give people that ability to do that. Where all of that comes in is, what is our role to make sure that even those that are working in our ecosystem feel as much a part of the organization as our staff. So we talk about culture, and for us, our culture and the way we work with young people, the way we work with our partners is so key. We call it our success. When it doesn't translate, we have not been successful. So when a partner speaks, do they speak like us? When speaks, speak like us. How do we them? How do we compensate them? We're talking about all of these things that we're doing for our staff, you know, medical insurance, our approach to medical insurance. How do we make sure, you know, that even within the different frameworks, you know, frankly, and I think you guys go, you know, way beyond what we will be, you know, how do we make sure that it is still fulfilling for that person? They feel included and is equity. I think this is a management challenge for HR to lead. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, because you have given me food for thought. You know, you've moved from the death of jobs or the end of the jobs into the skills-based organization, and you know how the curiosity around how it's going to run is shaping the way you are approaching it. You have no answers and you're just navigating it. I also like the way you brought in the culture conversation around the career management within the skills-based organization and some of the things that are shaping it. Thank you so much, because that then allows us to bring in Esther into this conversation. So Esther, I haven't listened to Tina in terms of the compensation conundrum, trying to solve that compensation. How do you compensate, you know, within this skills-based organization? How do you build that culture? So within this workforce ecosystem, you have made a very strong point on bringing in the voice of the workers. So within the ecosystem that we have, the worker agency is going to be stronger. It's going to rise. And so what are you seeing? What are you predicting? And what do human resources people have to start thinking about in terms of, as you build this workforce ecosystem, the worker agency is going to rise? Thank you, Esther.
Thank you very much, Chizoba. So yes, there's something called good jobs. And what that means is that you're not just offering jobs in organizations, or even when you're using, leveraging the gig economy. or all the alternative sources of jobs that we have available out there, but that the jobs are good. And when you say the jobs are good, it means that it actually meets people's aspirations in terms of pay, aspirations in terms of status, aspirations in terms of, how they can actually predict, the growth in their personal lives. And this is where that worker agency comes in, regardless of the format that organizations use, that there will be more demands, for increase in compensation, increase in different types of benefits. Unfortunately, that is not happening in many organizations today, because to the extent that you have your traditional forms of, of workforce support and management, you are able to disproportionately, pay your traditional workforce as against the alternative workforce, arrangements that you have out there. And I think the people or the particular sector that is most hit is the outsourcing, organizations, the ones who outsource their employees to organizations as third-party, support staff. They are the worst hit, and that is really where organizations, including ourselves, really need to start thinking, about how to bridge the gap between whatever the compensation and benefits of the traditional workforce is and this, third-party arrangements. But then when you go beyond the outsourced arrangements to the managed services and to, some of the gig workers, you find that there is another disproportion happening there, because we do have in our company all of the different formats that you can imagine: the traditional, the contractors, the temps, the direct payroll, the gig workers. All of them are supporting, with our work. And we have found instances where the gig workers like you, Chizoba, cost us an arm and a leg. Okay, because they know exactly, and we are not able to fit them into the traditional compensation models that we have, because it is all about skills. It is not about the person. And if it is the skills and capabilities that we're interested in, then we have to go to the negotiating table to agree what makes sense for that individual to bring their skills and capabilities to us. If we do not do it, we find that, before you're able to say Jack Robinson, another organization has snatched them up. And more skilled, more of skilled workers today are opting for that approach than even the traditional forms of employment. It is indeed a conundrum that organizations need to start thinking about. But honestly, if we're going to be moving swiftly away from just jobs and ending, this era of jobs to skills, then organizations must be ready and prepared to pay whatever is required to bring in the capabilities into the company. But what can then happen is that because of the cost implications of, bringing in such highly priced gig employees, have people who can understudy them, have a program in place for transfer of skills and knowledge to those who are, still part of your traditional workforce, assuming that the JAPA syndrome does not catch up with them as well. Because, you could have, which we have had, instances of a few people that we identified to understudy people with this, critical skills. And before the period of understudy was over, they had to leave for all the different personal reasons that, they are leaving for JAPA. But that's really how we're managing it right now. I wanted to also quickly chip in on what Tina said about the employer of record, which is another area that we are, managing issues around the JAPA syndrome and even the worker ecosystem at group level, and that we're leveraging even here in Nigeria, which is to say that there are different countries where we have engaged employers of record, to assist with those critical skills that we do not want to lose in the organization, for as long as, that country has an agreed arrangement with us and an employer of record, then we would rather go through that route to still retain the skills within the organization rather than lose the people completely. I think I'd leave it at that, Chizoba. Your device is
Okay,
muted.
thank you very much. You know how it is, your system suddenly decides to go rogue on you. Thank you. So if, I think, Oiza, you can give us a few words, around thinking about this issue of the workforce ecosystem, everybody, who's adding value. Look at the rise of the workers' voice as, you have more people. How do we bring in the voices of the people from this ecosystem into the conversation, especially in a place where we don't even see them? So I am providing support for different organizations and working with Deloitte. I'm working with different organizations on gigs. How is my voice going to be heard in the organization, supporting the organization either in their strategic direction or providing feedback in the organization around certain things that the organization needs to think about? What do you think?
Okay, thank you very much, Chizoba. So in terms of worker agency, sort of around the decision-making process, because I think that's one area that I say increasingly workers want to have a say, right? And it goes beyond the type of compensation, it even touches things like, what kinds of products are we sort of, are we creating for our customers? How do we serve our customers? What types of channels do we use, etc.? So I think one of the key things would be, as more and more organizations sort of flatten out, because a big issue is around when we do have organizations that are highly hierarchical. So that's where, most times people feel, oh, decision making really should only come from the top and cascade all the way down. And you see there's typically a disconnect where you hear workers saying, well, if you ask the typical person, what's the strategy of the organization, they probably have no clue. And you hear things like, oh, communication is an issue. We don't know what's going on. So we need to start creating platforms to sort of get people part of the process. An organization I know does that quite well in terms of when it even comes to its strategic planning process, right? So you would see an instance where you've had teams across the organization made up of people, different employees, different categories of employees being part of those various teams, and they come up with all sorts of ideas, right, around how to innovate and to drive business performance. And there's a forum where everybody sits with the top management and all of these things are shared. So more and more organizations need to create those platforms, those opportunities where people are able to contribute, right, in meaningful ways. And it goes beyond job titles, it goes beyond hierarchy, because you see there's a lot of innovation, right? There's a lot of collaboration, and it even helps in terms of the organizational culture, right? When people are able to sort of work together, regardless of, and it's not along reporting lines, right? It has nothing to do with reporting lines. It's across the organization, cross-functional, the decision-making process. In some cases, you even have a junior member of that team lead, right? Where, the person is providing direction and everybody's sort of following through. So it has, the culture really of organizations plays a really big role in giving different worker types a voice. Because clearly, I mean, ideas don't rest with one person. Ideas can even come from your customers, really. They can come from your stakeholders. So even creating platforms where, even from the community, your society, just getting creating opportunities where your different stakeholders, and that's where you then have a stakeholder mindset, right? You know that there are different people, quote and unquote, who sort of can contribute to my business being successful. So once you're able to identify those various, it could be your vendors, it could be anybody really, and beginning to sort of mine, the information that they provide to you, even the front, I mean, the best place I believe to get feedback in terms of even, maybe I'm digressing a bit, but this is just how you can get your different worker types. So take, for instance, a customer walks into the banking hall, encounters a teller. The teller most likely is an outsourced staff, so not your core staff. But guess what? That teller every day probably attends to maybe a minimum of 50 to 100 people who they engage with. Because your typical customer will come and say, oh, in this bank, this is what happened. No, this is what they're doing for me. So that's even that point is a source of data. It's an information point. So how do you sort of tap into the kind of feedback individuals at the front line are getting? And then how do you use it to your advantage in terms of what you do, right? The decisions you make, looking at your strategies, is it even working? Because sometimes we have all of these fancy business strategies, and then we begin to struggle with how come we're unable to implement? Because perhaps, you know what, maybe not getting the right information or the right feedback around this thing. So we have to be very deliberate, I think, in terms of just looking at our various worker types and how we can harness, you know, their potential and the information they get on the streets, whether it's people who are your direct sales agents, they're encountering your customers every day. So, you know, that's a really huge pool in terms of feedback. So I think it's a good way to really incorporate the different worker types into our decision-making process would be to find ways to sort of get them involved. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Oiza. That was eye-opening for us. You know, we have our frontline workers. How are we engaging them, you know, in terms of the feedback that they are receiving? It just, for me, is very, very eye-opening. I'm going to, you know, transition into the question and answer, as well as some of the other questions that I may have arising from the responses that you have all given. I think, Franklin, somebody is asking, if you have gig workers, how can you ensure and enforce the protection of their trade secrets? Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Franklin. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? All right. So again, you know, I did mention that some of these changes and demand for new ways of working, they come with very peculiar challenges, and this is one of them. Thankfully, we do have, you know, interesting policies around data protection and non-disclosure. But we know that even with all that in place, you will still find that people will still, you know, replicate your ideas, just change the company name and use your architecture and framework word for word. And I'm saying what we have seen firsthand. As a matter of fact, because we are very big on data and we analyze data, we also saw a new behavior in terms of the type of people who joined at some point. So we got a win that, you know, people joined some organizations, including ours. It happened to one of our competitor or, you know, sister company. And they joined primarily because they wanted to understand, you know, the structure of the business and replicate to set up a startup, almost replicate that particular business. So it is a challenge. We don't have all the answers yet. It's the truth. But what we have done is to use our, you know, cybersecurity guys and risk guys to strengthen the securities around what you can share, what you can transfer. There are mails that before you even send, system will ask you a question, trigger it to risk. So they've strengthened security in many ways. And this is in addition to, you know, all the other non-disclosure that are filed. Again, consistent with some of the things we shared today. We are research-minded. We think that a lot of the things we're doing is more of, and again, that report was really spot on again to the team. We are more of experimenting some of this decision, and in the process of experimenting, we are gaining more insights on how to do things better. So it's more or less we are rebuilding the plane as we are flying it. Again, so those are the things we've done. But we're seeing that, things are getting a lot better. But again, you still find one or two gaps, loopholes here and there. Thanks, Gisela.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. These are real life situations that organizations are grappling with, whether they are your employees, that you call them your permanent employees, or they are your gig workforce. These are risks, real life risks that we all need to try and find mitigating strategies for. Ngozi Achebe is asking about staff on demand. She says staff on demand is gradually becoming a strategy for creating organizational agility and managing risk associated with the great exit. Could any of the panelists share their experiences with staff on demand? Does anyone have an experience with staff on demand? Dr. OJ, Esther, Oiza, any one of you, or even Tina? And if Ngozi can just explain a bit more in terms of what you mean by staff on demand, because we may be calling it something else. Is it people on standby on your roster, on your, like gig roster that you can call up anytime? Just provide some more clarity. But does anybody want to answer that question?
Yes. If I understand her question, staff on demand means that these are people who are on standby. They are not permanent or even permanent temps with you for a defined period of time, a fixed term contract like 1 year or 2 years. It could just be as required. When you need them, you call them in, they do the work, and then they leave. Any other time you need them, you call them. So they are staff on demand. And in our customer service function, we do have such type, employees or people. There was a time, we had SIM registration issues, if you remember that particular period, generally in the industry. And we needed to do a lot in terms of eyeballing of the data, of customers that we're generating. And there were a lot of this type, of workforce ecosystem, members that we had to call upon as required. In some instances, it was just for a month. In some other instances, it was for 2 months. For some, it didn't exceed more than 3 months. And then you would have their, details or your contacts. Whenever you need them, you call them in, they do the work and they go. And some of them are not even interested in your usual 9 to 5, work. They are not interested in that. They just want to do the work and then go. So that really is staff on demand. And that's how we use them. And for some of them who are interested in transitioning to becoming a member of a permanent workforce, they do apply for vacancies as they become available in the organization. If they are successful, they get, hired into the workforce. Some others also transition from that very short term, 1-2 months, to fixed term contracts in terms of the graduate interns programs that we have in place in the organization, where they can actually do like 1 year or 2 years of work with the organization before they then move on to do some other things within the Nigerian ecosystem. But at least they would have gained the employment, the employability skills that we provide in the organization to enable them to move to other places.
Thank you very much for a very robust answer to that. What we are also seeing is, so somebody is asking, and gig workers, it may sound like a very simple, basic question, but I think it will help a lot of people to put a lot of our conversations into perspective. So they're asking that, how are gig workers different from contract staffing, and how does that impact succession planning and business continuity? So when you have gig workers, you've got contract workers, what's the difference, and then how does it impact continuity and succession planning? Who would like to take that on for us?
So if I just if I may before. Oh, Frank, please, Franklin, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, just to say something quickly, and I'll yield the floor to you very quickly. You see, we have reintroduced a lot of terminologies that confuse our evolution journey more than it was. So I was going to speak to the staff on demand. I mean, it sounds a lot like pipeline. People you have within your pipeline that you can almost convert and use from time to time. And yes, there is almost nothing new, right? So what we are calling gig economy today, we have applied differently using outsource or contract. So yes, you're right. It's not so much of difference. But the point I really want to make is, I think I forgot to ask Joseph last night when we were speaking. We need to find a way to institutionalize a lot of things we do in HR. And by institutionalizing, what I mean is find a way to harmonize our industry, because we need that standardization, right? So that we can make some progress. Again, I'll yield the floor to Steve to take the question. But I just thought for a lot of us on the call and for the panel, myself, we've been into conversations, we've had conversations, but it may appear as though the way we solve some of these problems is very premature, because you still find them. Businesses are still having these issues. I'll say something and I'll just drop the mic. I think HR should stop fighting for a voice on the table. The board, stop fighting. Everyone who has a voice on the table today, they have certain unique value they create. The moment HR start creating the right value, you won't need to ask for a voice. You'll be invited to the table. We have not started creating the value that we should be creating in a very proactive and strategic way, in a way that is timely. A lot of the things we are seeing today, HR is reacting. I started hearing about VUCA some 10 years ago. VUCA, this, that. COVID is a VUCA experience, whether we like it or not. But we were never prepared for VUCA. We had sessions about VUCA. The term sounded very nice. We talked about the vulnerability, uncertainty. Everybody gets excited. I'm an HR practitioner. We did not do anything about readiness. Deloitte did a very fantastic research on organizational resilience. It was done. It wasn't cascaded. Organization did not go back to replicate strategies and models to prepare us for what's coming in the future. So again, it's nice to use these terms interchangeably, but what would be good for us, as professionals, is to take these conversations forward. So we invite Esther, Oiza, Joseph, and say, how do we solve the problem of, because this whole personalize my benefit. So if you have 2,000 staff and you personalize benefit for 2,000 staff, I can't imagine what type of organization you want to be running. So I'm very realistic with some of these solutions. Some things are not possible. That's the truth. But should we be flexible? Yes. And I know maybe I'm changing the course of this question, but I just thought to say this, that while these terms are very nice, we want to keep this conversation going. We're excited. What do we do? How do we make sure that this whole agency worker thing does not become a bone for HR professionals, where our organization starts struggling because now, this agency worker thing is now, again, how do we make sure that this ecosystem thing does not translate into another, how do Yoruba people used to say it, a road on walk, where we are chasing it, meanwhile business is suffering. So again, good conversation, but I think it's about time. It's about time we sit down and say we want to focus on telecoms, we want to focus on tech. We sit as HR professionals, we come up with working solutions. that we can institutionalize, go to whichever regulatory board and say, you know what, we have seen them do this, we have seen these guys do this, but with HR, we want to do this. We want to harmonize compensation and reward. We want to harmonize contracting so that we can find a way to solve these problems beyond just talking about them. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Franklin, that's not about to happen. And the reason why that's not about to happen is that the ball is out of our court and out of our hands. We are only reacting to the situation that we have found ourselves in. And that's one of the reasons why these human capital trends conversations usually happen. The world in which we live in is no longer ours to shape. As new technology comes out, it changes dramatically the work that's going to be done. And as it changes the work that's going to be done, it changes the people that's going to be doing it and the places that is going to be done. So there is some control that we can have, but a lot of these, especially for regulated organizations, there are conversations that we need to have in our organizations and in our industry in terms of moving forward. We will have that after the party conversation.
1 minute.
Don't worry, Franklin. Don't worry, Franklin. We'll have that conversation afterwards. I'm just trying to wrap up this side of it. After party, we always have a very thriving conversation with all of us agreeing and disagreeing.
You put only 1 minute.
So if we can just have Oisa. Oisa, we have spoken to you about is Dr. OJ. If Dr. OJ can weigh in on the final question, let's find that final question. Don't worry, Franklin, we will come back on that conversation. Let's take the final question. And that question is still in terms of how do we manage succession and how do we manage succession, career management in this new world of work that we are finding ourselves in, where we are moving towards skills-based. We are going to be activating the workplace and then talking about the workforce ecosystem and not just about our employees. What are the things that you're seeing in terms of career development?
Okay, so thank you. Very, very useful conversations and very good question as well. So when you think about on demand, if I reflect on that, so within our own energy industry, there are types of work that are peak shaving in nature. For example, when we are drilling some wells, it doesn't happen all the time. So you need to employ some of those people on a continuous basis, and therefore the employment relationship shifts from contract of service to contract for service, and where you can have service providers. Yes, they are deploying people, but at particular times on call-off basis. And so, when you transit that into succession planning, the model of succession planning therefore is more of cover plan, so cover plan where in your organizations you are able to define business critical positions and for which you say to yourself at any point in time, will you really be stranded in terms of being able to do that work? So it therefore presents some mix of models. So there will be situations where when you have defined those business critical positions, you have your own internal resources who can fill those roles. But at the same time, if there are business critical positions as well, where it is, again, as we have all highlighted, it's more about focus on the skills. You can actually do cover plan based on those type of contracts that I've talked about, contract for service, because at the end of the day, is to ensure that at any point in time, you are not stranded in terms of being able to fill that gap. So the traditional way of always having your own succession plan based on your own staff alone is in such a way that is transitioning in a way that you can have your own children in that cover plan, at the same time have external resources that are reliable, tied with contracts and all that. and commitment to be able to get that done. So it's not we're not having the luxury as we used to have, where you can say for every one position you need to have 3 people being able to do that in terms of succession planning, but in a way that you recognize that resources can be can be bought elsewhere and by other means, but tying it down strongly to ensure that it happens when you do have a gap. I hope that's a response to it, Chizoba, for given the time we have.
For me, that also gingers a conversation. That also gingers the conversation around the new world of succession planning. Just before, because Franklin is going to close the conversation for us, but Tina, what are you seeing in terms of changes in career management and human resources practice, in this new world of work?
Yeah, so I think I gave the example, of how we are approaching, especially matching skills to the work that has to be done. And like I indicated, I think the level of interest, in staff to be matched has gone really, really high. And that's really changing our focus on how we approach career management. I think whereas we would typically have had, these are the ladders that we follow, and these are the set successors based on criteria that was more traditional and role-based, we are just seeing a natural evolution, right, to what are your interests. So the career discussion is becoming so critical in how we are moving, individuals along. So our focus now is on working with individuals on purpose. What is your purpose? How does your purpose materialize here? What are your interests in? What are your career interests? And working more with that and what the organization needs than, making it more top-down only. So really bringing in that voice of our staff into how they manage their careers and the opportunities within the organization. So I think I can't stop without responding to Franklin, and supporting you, Chizoba, in just saying that, you know what, my brother, the world has moved. And when we talk about personalizing benefits, this is nothing new to what used to be called the cafeteria model many, many years ago. The difference now, and you need to look into this, you are in the tech space, is what is the technology that can support you to do this? We have over 600 people, and we need to find ways to make this available to staff, because not only does it enrich their experience, improves their employee engagement, but this is something that we think is imperative, and a basic service that we should be supplying to our staff. Workers are no longer just a resource for the organization. I think the individual behind that resource is now exercising agency. And we should be excited about how do we respond to support the needs that these human beings behind that staff number need. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for those final words for us. Or is that your final words on this topic?
Okay, thank you very much, Chizoba. I will just say that from everything we've said today, it's obvious that be it leaders, be it managers, be it HR, we all require new capabilities, honestly, to really be able to thrive, because the world has moved from sustaining and it's thriving is driving. So really it's something that, there's a lot of experimentation happening, and I just scribbled down, in today's world, honestly, we're just, we're experimenting, we're iterating, because like even Tina mentioned, there's nothing is cast in stone anymore, right? So even when you do think you have it down to the path today, tomorrow, everything can change. So it's really agility, how we're able to sort of be flexible around what we do. Do we leave room to sort of fail fast, recover, and then, hey, what's the next thing we need to do? So, those will be my final words. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Steve?
Doctors go to the hospital.
Maybe so, I mean, a lot has been said today, and again, if I'm just speaking to my brother Franklin, just to say that a number of things we've discussed today, whether it's about the world of work, whether it's about the human risk, whether it's about the boundaryless world as we have it, and we're able to articulate it properly and have one or two to go back home and implement for organizations, whether for us as panel members and for those who are following the conversation. I think that can take us to the table because these are real risks that face us today. And there is no bigger risk that face organizations that is not within human elements and the human factor and the human impact. And our job and our challenge is how being able to articulate it and get that voice to be heard, whether we are getting those voice to be articulated through organizations such as Deloitte to help us advocate it better than we can do. I think they will be speaking for all of us, and I think that can get us that rightful place on the table. Because having been at the table myself, there is nothing that happens there where they will, even the different leaders will not benefit from the insights that come from us as those who are close to the people. Because the business is, people is the business at the end of the day. And so the challenge for all of us as HR is how to sharpen that skill, knowing that people really is the business. And if we can articulate some of those insights and we can take it back home and find one or two nuggets to implement, we'll as someone said, we'll not just be on the table, we'll take the table and take the chairs. And I hope this gives us the perspective to get that to work. Back to you, Chizoba.
Thank you so much. And Esther, before we have the wrap up with Franklin. Esther?
Okay, thank you very much. So, I mean, it's been an enriching conversation. Thank you very much to all the panelists for, sharing your insights. I think that in this new boundaryless world that we're talking about, we must begin to design for impact across 3 levels, in fact, 3 spheres: the individual level, the organization level, and also societal level. And that the one thing that is, really bringing all of these 3 levers together is accountability. The individual has to be accountability in taking decisions and making known their choices, the worker agency that we were talking about. The organization has to be willing to listen, to understand that it is not a one-size-fits-all. And then society at large has to be ready to take, all the decisions that societies take, the social enterprise and all of that are required to really, really force, and ensure an effective implementation of this boundaryless world that we're talking about. I think if we're able to do that at the end of the day, it will be another set of trends that Deloitte will be talking about, having mastered this boundaryless world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope Deloitte is ready. The Deloitte team, you're ready with the poll, so that once we have the final word from Franklin, we can launch the poll, our second poll, which will be on Mentimeter. So I would encourage all our participants, please bring out your phones because you're going to scan the QR code so that you can be part of that poll, so we can get a feedback from you in terms of the trends and where we'll take this conversation going forward. Franklin, let's have your final word.
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I think we may be speaking to 2 different things.
Okay.
Just to put the conversation in context. So we are way ahead. We have a strategy lever that's called enhanced differentiated reward. So we are far gone on the journey of different people. So it's like your DSTV bouquet. So you go on compact, go on premium. We're way gone. We are responding to where we are. I think the point I was trying to make earlier is how can we be more proactive? How can we bring governance even in the midst of the chaos? Because we also stand a risk of creating more problems while trying to respond to where we are. I think that's the point I was making. So it's not denying the fact that we are already in an interesting space, and we're trying to react and respond to it, which is not an effective way in the real sense of it. But to add and take the conversation forward of saying, how do we even, bring some structure and order into where we are? And the reason I touched on, this whole table board HR is because we talk a lot more about it than we prepare for it. So oftentimes when we get the opportunity, we're not even ready to deliver on it again. So different conversation. And I'm very happy to have this conversation outside this call and learn. I've seen firsthand. I've worked with very, senior HR people before I got to this seat. I have seen this firsthand. I've reviewed data points. A lot of our international partners, these are the conversation that is going on. We've been talking about this thing almost from inception. My wrap-up point is, again, to thank everyone on the panel for the insightful conversation. Thanks to Deloitte for the opportunity to learn. But one thing I would say, very consistent with my last comment, is we need to frame these challenges, right? There's a lot of things all over the show. People are interpreting the problem statement in a way, that may be misrepresented. And we need to find a way to situate it properly and investigate the root cause. Tina already talked about designing for impacts, which is something I think we need to relook and do differently. But thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you touched on a very important topic. There are many organizations that are far ahead of the curve, like your organization. And as front leaders, you would also shape the conversations that the rest of us are having around, how do we live with these trends? How do we thrive in these trends? Of course, by the time Deloitte does the next round of assessments, and I think it starts in September, October, when they send out the links for these trend conversations and the picking up the trends, so that we are all part of that conversation, and so we can also see the trends that are going on in Nigeria. I'd like to thank all the panelists for an awesome conversation. A lot of the participants are itching for the after conversations, so that their questions can be answered. It becomes an open mic activity. We bring on people to ask those questions, have those conversations. So thank you very much to all our panelists, to Esther, to Steve, to Franklin, to Oiza, and to Tina for almost 2 hours of a conversation and bringing very deep insights into the topic at hand. I'm really, really, really grateful for the learnings, that I have received today. I've been taking notes, and my notes are quite full, and I will be tweeting, and I'll be sharing on social media the lessons that I've learned. And we're asking you to use the hashtag Deloitte TMP and hashtag Deloitte Human Capital Trends. So that you can be part of that conversation, and we'll take it to the social media to constantly engage on some of the trends that we're seeing. Workplace activation of the future of the workplace appears to be something very critical, and we'll be talking to Deloitte about how can we have further discussions around this. So we're going to go to our second poll, and please whip out your phones for you to be able to scan the QR code, and let's have a feedback. Or you can go to menti.com, www.menti.com, and type in the code 81745838. I repeat, 81745838. Be part of this feedback. Let's pick up what's going on and which of these insights did you pick up, which one resonates with you, and which one do you think that in your organization you will start the conversation on. Thank you very much. And hopefully as you respond, all the responses will be coming on the screen, so we have an idea of what people are saying and what people are thinking. Okay, so we are seeing that the future of work is hybrid and not remote, and you picked up new insights around remote work. Please join the conversation. Let's Thank you. Thank you. Boundaryless work has come to stay. There's no going back on this. Agility, yes, that's what we're seeing, that agility is key. We've got to be able to navigate and change direction. Defining for impact, not all new trends can be implemented in your organization. Thank you very much, Franklin, for that very strong caution. You don't jump on every trend. You've got to have those conversations. You have to know what you have an appetite for you to be able to be part of that trend. So somebody picked up organizing in 3 spheres. Thank you very much, Esther, for that. Or you have to organize at the level of the individual, the organization. That's impact for the individual, impact for the organization, and impact for the society. Thank you. Thank you to everyone. We've only got 32 responses, but we've got 312 people. And just if we can just close our eyes and just do this, and let's reach like 200 in the next 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So while we're waiting for to see how many responses, I think I can also ask Joseph a question. Yes, he may be our host, but he's also part of our panel. So Joseph, for you, working with different organizations, consulting for different organizations, what are you seeing in the trends that you're seeing, or some of the challenges or constraints that you're seeing within the Nigerian ecosystem?
Thank you, Chizoba. I'm just struggling as to where to start the answer to that question, but I'll just try and frame it this way. I think, for me, each time I look at the trends, right, the 10 trends, I could easily situate it within our own environment. What I think, seems to be a big challenge is first coming to terms with the reality, to be honest. And following the path that was told by Franklin, we really need to be able to frame that challenge. And I think that's where, the work really is. How do you frame that challenge or those challenges, and how do we begin to navigate, the path? The path will not be easy. It will be tough. We're not going to get everything. We're not going to get 100% on everything, but we need to actually begin to ask ourselves, what can we do at this point in time? I think the other challenge we seem to have is being able, and I heard doctors saying we'll be at the table, what's in the room, and even carry the table. But that's still a bit of a challenge, right? I mean, I engage with a lot of, heads of human capital, and the kind of feedback I get is seems to be some sort of, blockage, right? Between, them and of course, maybe, people at the senior level. And, maybe again, because we do a lot of talking amongst ourselves, HRs, we talk to HR, okay? We probably don't talk to the C-suite. And I think that's where there's also need to be a shift, right? I mean, I've listened to, head of HR say, oh, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Now, we need to change that mindset. That mindset needs to change completely. And also recognizing the fact that we do not have all the solutions. Now, don't get me wrong. The number of HR people that will tell you, whatever it will take, you will go that route. We will do the right things, right? We will force the right conversations. But I think a lot are still somewhat behind in terms of how we force those conversations. And I use the word force deliberately, because we have to be very intentional about it. If we do not force those conversations, they're not going to happen. And our people, I mean, the staff, I mean, I call it our people really, they're actually looking up to us, waiting for us to lead the way. I mean, we talk about being agile, and I always tell people, where we talk about agile or agility, it should start with the HR. In everything you do, right, you should actually lead that way. So today we talk about skills-based organization. I like Tina's example, fantastic example. But I can also say that a lot of us are dealing with that in organizations, right? And because we're actually not asking those questions, and I keep going back to the show, framing that challenge, thinking like a researcher and say, hey, wait a minute, what does this mean? And being able to support that with data, that is also very, very essential, right? The only way you will make headway in a lot of things is you're engaging a C-suite, a CEO, whatever the matter is, whatever the person is, and you are putting the data right in front of him, right? Okay, this is what the data is saying. And you're able to provide, those insights on the back of the data. And you're showing the benefit to the organization, to the people, and to what I think it was Oisa, and at some point it was Esther, where we talk about, how do you, when you show this benefit and you're looking at the entire ecosystem as well, that begins to make sense. And I think that's another area where I think we still kind of struggle with. So if you look at the entire trend, and it's not just about our jurisdiction, we also see another jurisdiction, what we found out, which is what we do every year, is beyond the trend, we also ask for the level of readiness. So you see instances where, even C-suite will say, oh, this is important. We recognize that, the way we want to work today is based on skills and not based on jobs. Then the next question is, how ready are we? And you see 9 out of 10 says, we recognize this is a problem, we need to fix it. And only 2, perhaps say that, we're actually doing it. So the question therefore is that why are others not doing it? So that's also what needs to change. I mean, I can talk, like I said, I don't know where to start from, but I can talk on and on and on based on my experience. But what I see, is just like you have said, we will continue to, advance the story. We continue to put it on the table to advance the conversation and clearly see how things, will change.
Okay. So thank you very much for that insight. You did hit it on the head, in terms of, it's also about us as human resources professionals. So is your title human resources, or is your work human resources management? Are you skilled to understand the human resources issues? Because that will give you the voice. Even if they don't give you a chair at the table, they will come back to you to ask you for some of those. A good example is having moved from private sector, moved from MTN. I moved into ECOWAS, into the role as a HR director. They had never had one. And then also moved to Central Bank as HR director. And in the Central Bank, HR was known for personnel management and administration. However, the conversations that I wanted to have were conversations around economic policy and managing the financial services. Because if I understood what the issues were, then I can understand the kinds of people that we require, the kinds of skills that we require, how we're going to buy those skills, borrow those skills, boost build those skills, bounce those skills, if we didn't need them. And, with data, building the data capability of the human resources team, it became very clear in terms of strategy, what we had to do, and then also to elevating the people risk to the board, then you had a seat at the table. So for every board meeting, I was asked to always come back with something in terms of how do we shape the journey for the central bank people. So it's always about value, and it's always about the kinds of conversations that you have with the leadership. And you can't have emotional conversations. It's nice to have conversations. It's got to be, the data has to speak, and it's got to be about money. If you know what's important to your principal, then that's where you then now, you use as your leverage for the conversations that you have. So we're going to end this conversation with Joseph, and Joseph is going to do the vote of thanks. Either Joseph or Yemi Saka is going to do the vote of thanks and lead us through to the end of this, and then we can then start the conversations and bring people on board to have the chat with us. Thank you very much, and it was great moderating the session with Jumoke on these Human Capital Trends 2023. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chizoba. For me, at this point, I don't know whether you are, Deloitte, whether you are ex-Deloitte. It's difficult to actually know where you are. So thank you so much. You've been a part of the family for so long, and it's happy to also have you again today. So thank you for the work done. Jumoke, thank you so much, for setting the tone right from the for that powerful introduction that led us to the event. My next thank will go to, of course, to our, very intelligent. I'm looking for the right word to describe our panelists today. I mean, it's been very awesome. We've done this for years, and I think this really stood out, to be honest. In terms of the quality of conversations, how we dimension issues, and I think and the experiences we brought to bear, sharing some of what we're doing. I think for me, that's what a lot of people want to actually learn. So what are you doing? How are you doing it? Even where you've made mistakes, of course, they also want to learn from those mistakes and then see what they can do. So thank you so much. Starting with our international panelists. So once international now, we have several of them on the call. So starting with Tina. Someone sent me a chat, private chat me and said, "Where's Tina from?" I said, "I don't know. When you see Tina, please ask her." To my friend who is always, is always on the road. That's Esther. At some point, I don't know where she's always traveling to. So, thank you for being here. Then of course, to Oyiza, Chizoba's cousin. Now that I know that I didn't know that before. So thank you, Lisa, for being here. Then of course I'll go to doctor. We do have so many doctors in the room, just two of them. I hope you to join you soon. Don't worry. Dr. Steve, thank you so much, for being here and for sharing your insight as well. And of course, last but not the least, it's my friend and colleague. That's I call him my friend and colleague because I know he's told me that I'm old and I should leave this space. So we're friends and colleagues, right? And we're still age mates. So that's Franklin. So Franklin, thank you so much as well. Interestingly, Franklin, had to, share a couple of things to be here this morning. So thank you for making out time. I've been really, really, excited. I've been quite impressed by your conversations, your contributions, and like Chizoba said, happy to actually take this forward. And I need to also promise you that we are also not stopping at this point. We are also taking this to the level of CEOs because they also participated in that survey, right? We will very soon will be having the CEOs and the CHROs in the room, so we can actually have those conversations as well. So that's also the next bit we're doing. And of course, like I said, we will be having a session, devoted, strictly to the skills-based, organization. That for us is very, very important. That we'll spend time, talking about that, at some point. So, that said, I think it's also important to, I was going to call one of my colleagues. I thought he was on the call. That's Mr. Sheyarowolo, to please join me this appreciation. But I don't know whether Sheya is in the room. If he is in the room, he will just say one or two things. He manages all our human risk, so I'm sure he can say one or two things just to also add to my voice. But importantly, I also want to say this, last but not the least, of course, our the audience, those who have made out time to attend to this event, right? Without you, this event would not have taken place. So thank you so much. Your questions were quite also insightful. They were thought-provoking, and I just believe that we're able to do justice to some of them. And if not, of course, I'm sure you can always reach out to, the panelists, at different times. I'm sure, they are mentors in a way, just like, someone has said on the call. So thank you very much for making that time. Please, you can download the full report. I think it's been shared at some point. And also to let you know that the 2024 trend is actually on. So again, we'll share that with you, more about that, so that you can also be part of it. It's always good. And I think Tina did ask a question at some point, whether we have the African perspective, right, of this. Yes, we do have, right? And it's important. Again, what's also critical is, as many of us, take part in this. So that also helps to enrich, whatever outcomes or insights that we're able to share. So once again, thank you so much, everyone. And I look forward to seeing us very, very soon. So back to you, Jumoke and Chizoba.
Thank you very much. And so these are our offerings in Deloitte, and you could bring us in for HR transformation, organization transformation, strategic change and leadership, learning, job and competency architecture, rewards assessment, future of work. Deloitte is very strong on the future of work and these conversations that drive and shape the way that organizations respond to the situation. Are you surviving or are you going to thrive? If you understand the future of work and the future of talent optimization and workforce optimization, you're very more likely to ride the waves of whatever it is that's coming. So human capital operate as learning, change management, organization design, organization and people, design and integration of people practices, ESG. So these are a lot of our offerings. If you want to take on conversations around these, the future of the work, the future of the workplace, the future of the workforce, we are the people that you should be talking to in Deloitte. So we are in the after party. I hope you have scanned the code for the 2024 survey. Please, if you haven't, please kindly scan that code and let your voice be heard in terms of where the trends are going. I will be very glad, very, very glad to have a lot more responses from Nigeria. Thank you very much, everyone. And so for the Deloitte team, if people raise their hands, if we can see how we can bring them on to ask the questions or get the panelists, let's go through the questions one after the other. We can do 45 minutes, go through questions one after the other. You can drop off at any time and then just see how we can respond to the questions. That's where the value is for the participants and to see what we can answer there. So whoever wants to answer any of, just jump in and answer the question. So the first question, should hybrid or remote be just opposed against salary increments in our current economic realities? What do you think?
So before,
who wants to answer?
Yeah, before someone answers the question, I actually left out a few people. My apologies. Sorry. I think I have to say thank you to Uloma. Uloma is not here now.
Yes.
I mean, she actually worked,
thank you, Uloma.
Yeah, I mean, she did all the work with our team, before we got to this point. But as usual, she has Japa as well. The way it works.
That's what I heard.
So thank you, Uloma. I'm sure she's on the call.
Thank you, Uloma. She's been chatting with me.
Oh, fantastic. So
same
with Toby, Inkem, I think more. I can't remember all of them. So thank you. I mean, you guys are not left out. So thank you very much for the hard work for putting this together.
And Chike, my other cousin, thank you.
Ah, yes, absolutely. Thanks, Chike.
Yes, and who's on again? There's Mobolaji, there's Dara, there's Dimeji.
Absolutely. Toby, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So which of our panelists is brave enough? Who wants to try? Should hybrid or remote be juxtaposed against salary increments in our current economic realities?
So Chizoba, yes. Just trying to understand that question. Is that question saying that even though there is a hybrid work, should there also be salary increments?
So I want to believe that, yes, if we have hybrid or remote work, should people have salary increments? How would you manage the flexible work and the salary increment?
Yeah, so in terms of hybrid work, of course, there would also still be salary increments, depending on the, on the strategy of the organization and on the structure of the organization. We have a hybrid work in place, work model in place in my organization, and yet we still do the normal salary increments that are necessary to be done. So it doesn't in any way invalidate, the need for you to have salary increases. You've just said that this is the future of work. This is now how we would be doing the work, and productivity is not impaired in any way. Your performance is not being lowered in any way. If anything, you're even having higher levels of productivity and performance. So if the company is making more money, revenue is increasing, profitability is increasing, it stands to reason that you then should also give out the salary increments that employees need to have. That's really my take on that.
Can I add? I think maybe another way, because I also didn't understand the words that we used. Another problem that we would have to deal with in organizations is when there's a part of the organization that can go fully remote, some that can go hybrid, and some that cannot go hybrid and must come to work. I think there are perceptions of inequity, that are being created. And so could the question also be asking, how do you arrive at an equitable, position in terms of, and I don't know if it's necessarily salary as opposed to incentives. How do you incentivize those that need to be coming into office every day, without penalizing those that are working from home? Because I think the cost of living remains the same. Maybe you are not spending 5 hours in traffic anymore, but I think research has shown materially, nothing really changes as far as compensation is concerned. I'm sort of looking at that question in this way.
Thank you very much for that stab at it. The two are not exclusive. You are paying for the skills, and remote flexible work is an arrangement that also is beneficial to organizations. The footprint, the real estate footprint of the organization, they can take a look at it. And then in terms of timing, in terms of all the physical structures that support individuals, there can be savings also from there. So the next question is...
Sorry, before you go ahead, and I think I want to hear from, I'm not going to provide an answer, just to hear from our panelists as well. So how do you explain this, right? And this is a practical example of someone who recently picked up a job, and so he was asked to choose between working from home and coming to the office. Working from home, he gets $15 per, coming to the office, he gets $15 per hour. Working from home, he gets $18 per hour. How do you explain that? It's for our panelists to just jump into that fray and let's, yes.
I think it depends on, oh, sorry, Steve, I spoke a bit too much, but let me just go for a second. I think it depends on the context, of the organization. To Chizoba's point, there are real savings, potential savings, that can come from having people working from home. And if the organization has done that cost-benefit analysis, they might want more people working from home. What we are finding in some of the countries in where we operate, working from home is not that easy. And it is possible that incentivizing people to work from home is a business imperative. So that's how I would approach that question. Thank you.
I think Dr. Steve is itching to go.
I think Tina has actually captured it. So if I start from the example you gave, it will depend significantly to the organizational context. For example, if my organization, if you're having people to work from home and I don't close down the office and people the office remains open, their desk remain available and so on and so forth. I'm also recognizing internal equity in terms of pay. I won't do that. But if as a result of people having to work from home, I'm having to shut down half of my office, so on and so forth, we might consider that. But in our own current context as well, you'll see that we pay standard, we make standard payments to people, whether it's transport allowance and so on and so forth. I don't see organizations withholding transport allowance because the person has not come to work, you know. So in a way, it's just for people to understand their own context, also recognizing that in pay, internal equity is key. But at the same time, we are asking people to work from home or come to the office. There are additional considerations that apply to you as an organization, and all that need to be able to, you need to put all that on the table. But when I reflect on what might be driving the first question in terms of differentiated pay, I think the person may be referring to situations where you're having, for example, part-time. So if somebody is doing part-time, of course, I mean, you may have to reduce pay to align with that. If somebody is giving you 50% versus another person giving you 100%, that might be the basis to make that differentiation, because one is full-time, the other one is part-time. But where everybody is doing the same, as it were, if anchoring on the point that Esther made in the beginning in terms of the fact that we're being driven by KPIs and the value that we are bringing, I don't see the basis for that level of differentiation. Yeah.
I think what's happening also, Joseph, is the fact that our compensation has not moved from where it was from 1940s and 1950s. And then we keep adding on all these benefits with all sorts of funny names onto it. If we had very clean compensation, and this is the total compensation that comes to you, we won't be having these conversations around is it transport allowance, or is it housing allowance, or is it, you know, so our compensation as HR people, we need to go and look at that compensation. And, you know, it came up in 2020, 2021 around the compensation conundrum. You know, what are we compensating people for? And, you know, how do we make our compensation to be tied to the work and not to all the stuff, you know, around it? In highly unionized sectors and industries, yes, they continue to drive these conversations around all these allowances, but we will have to get to the point where we need to talk about the clean compensation because it is based on that. And then for those who are talking remote and those who are talking on site, because there's another question somewhere on that says, how are you going to compensate those who come to work daily? And then for those who are working remotely, how are you going to compensate them different from the people who are working remotely? And all to Tina's point of, this isn't about whether people are working in the office or working at home. This should be about the work that people do and the value that people add to it. So I don't know who, if Oisa wants to weigh in on that.
Joseph, a question. Sorry, Oisa, just in case you want to speak. Joseph, just to balance your question, is the $15 to $18, is that take home or is it full gross? Because again, that again would spin the conversation differently. Is that what they are taking home, or it's the entirety of the
gross
package?
Gross.
Oh, is the gross?
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky because what we are doing is what we're doing is a bit different. My initial, okay, maybe I'll go after his answer. Okay, I'll just go. My initial understanding was maybe because this person is doing remote, there's some savings from transportation and a few other benefits that is then converted to monthly cash. Because for the most part, a lot of people who are doing this gig conversation typically they're just interested in what they get at the end of the day. So what we've done in terms of differentiated pay is look at our pay structure and do a different model for them where they get more on a monthly basis. But the guys who, using the example, the guy who may be getting $15 is entitled to like 3 different bonuses, from individual performance bonus to corporate level performance bonus to what we have called end of cycle bonus or retention bonus as well. So that guy doesn't get so much on a monthly basis, but he has three different points where he can get lump sum. If he's married, his wife gets a spousal allowance. He gets child education support, which the other person doesn't get. Again, that's how we've differentiated us. So, but it will be interesting to know the explanation behind why somebody is doing remote. If it's gross, I will be keen to even understand why they are adopting that type of model.
Well, maybe that's what they negotiated with the individual for the skills to come in. We need the skills. The skill is sitting somewhere, and okay, for you to come into the organization, we want you in the organization. Then maybe you need to work remote, and then they agree the price. The problem is that our compensation is the problem. All the elements of our compensation is what is holding us back in the conversation around what real work should be done in the office and what can be done remotely. I know that all through the weekend, we kept having the conversation around if organizations have branches in different locations. A good example, a bank, and you have branches in locations. Why are we not asking people to resume in any of the branches that is close to them? If they are required in the branch, then what kinds of arrangements are we going to make for them coming into the branch, and coming into the head office or their own branch, like for the customer service people, what kinds of arrangement to make life easier for them in terms of coming in and out. But, these are conversations that we must have in organizations. What is the real work? If we understand the real work, what work needs to be done in a particular location and what work can be done elsewhere. It will take months, it will take years to agree on something. But like Esther was saying, these are conversations that we must have. And we must then have those conversations around what the compensation will be in these arrangements, and how are we going to manage all the other people who have to do it in a particular location. So.
Sorry, Chizoba, just to mention something quickly, I forgot. Okay. I did not call Joseph old though. So I don't run to I don't run to
no age is
Joseph is old, I beg. He's old.
No,
don't even apologize. He's old man.
So that I don't come to you for help, Dr. Steve or Chizoba.
No, he's an old man.
It's okay. It's okay. but Chizoba,
we have already find you one goat.
Disclaimer before
one
you.
Don't worry, Franklin. I'll beg for you. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Just reflecting on what Chizoba was just saying and talking about sort of using the example of organizations that have a large footprint in terms of maybe like a branch network. It just occurred to me, all of the places where I've had people talk about wanting to work remote, I've not heard that really coming strongly from anybody outside of Lagos. I'm saying in my own environment. So the question for me is, what is even driving? Is it I want the flexibility because of traffic, or because, come to think about it, while you were talking, Chizoba, I was just reflecting and, saying that where there's always the clamor for would like to work remotely, and that's questioning what's really the motive. Is it now the convenience? Because I don't want to do 3 hours in traffic. I don't want to wake up by 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and things like that. So yes, I agree with you that, coming from both sides of the spectrum, where we're talking about fully on site to all the way full remote, there's an in-between. In fact, there are several in-betweens.
Yeah, several.
Right? So it is then, how do we explore those in-between? Some people is flexi time. Some people is location near my house. Some people is come 3 times, hybrid, whatever. So I think the real question, and that's where there's the co-creating, right, with the workforce is, when we say, what are we talking about exactly? So that we don't have this whole, everything must be done remote. And then at the end of the day, because we have to balance business imperative with
employee preferences and then find some middle ground that works. And that's just what I wanted to just say with regards to that. Thank you.
Esther, you've been having those conversations. What are you saying?
We even have a program in place.
Esther is a veteran, so she's
yes.
the
we have actually implemented a program called AAW, Anywhere, Anytime Work. And what that means is that you can work from any of our branches closest to your home if you wish. Exactly. You can come in, stagger your resumption time and your closing time. You can actually work from home if you wish, despite the fact that we have a hybrid program in place. There are individuals who work fully on site because as far as they're concerned, they don't want to be bothered with the issue of power, in the home and all of the challenges with infrastructure, home infrastructure in getting the work done. So they would rather come to the office and do the work. Several times I see them and I challenge them to say, but I thought you guys were clamoring for, some form of flexibility. And the answer was really beautiful. It was, yes, this is flexibility. So flexibility now is, from the eye of the beholder, from the choice that you have given me to be able to make. So some other people are interested in doing the hybrid. Some want to do full remote, but our AAW actually works, which means that your normal workplace could be in Lagos and you have a need to travel out of Lagos. And you can work from out of Lagos for as long as you wish. So anywhere in Nigeria, it is boundaryless. You can be based in, your normal office could be based in Lagos, but you're working out of Abuja. And so long as you are delivering on your, work outcomes and you're available for meetings and you can collaborate, we do not have any problem with that. We have a few instances where people also need to work outside of the country, borderlessly. And those are the instances where we have all the challenges that were highlighted earlier on, the tax issues, the international, the legal issues, the immigration issues, even data privacy issues. Okay, and that's also the reason we, have contracted with employers of record to help manage that particular, issue and situation. But flexibility is, as I am a proponent of worker agency, it is as the employee wants it. That choice is important.
Okay, so sitting in Accenture, when I used to work for Accenture and then now working for Deloitte, as far back as, the 1990s, 2000, and that's the way Deloitte works, where we are sitting in the client side, working from the client side and still have access to the resources. So these organizations have been in the forefront of work from anywhere, including, even when people are out of the country, they could go into any of the Deloitte offices or could work from any of the anywhere really, because they had access to the organization's system. So organizations need to prepare themselves because working hybrid and working from home has its own, you've got to have the platform, you've got to have access to the systems, you've also got to have collaborative tools for people to be able to work together. And you have to have productivity tools that enables people to stay focused, on the work that they also have to do. The next question that we have is talking about a radical design of the work operating model rather than small incremental changes, and that we need to tackle disruption from an industry point of view rather than just one organization's best practice. Is there any way that, how do we drive this instead of taking the small steps, for organizations to leapfrog into some of the things that need to happen in the future of work? That's the comment on the question.
If you don't mind, because I'll be dropping off shortly,
okay.
If I can just go at this. I think that's a very beautiful comment. And it's really what Deloitte is also pioneering. That's exactly what we're doing with this webinar, which is to say that beyond, the incremental steps that are taking place in different organizations. Why don't we elevate this to a nation, in a nationwide conversation where we bring together all industries, all sectors of the economy, and we are taking all the different, key topics. Chizoba, you've been talking about conversations that we need to have around compensation. Now we're talking about boundaryless work. There's something on succession planning, some other thing on culture, some other thing on career management, on all the different areas that are germane to having a good and effective HR management system in place in an organization. And we begin to have those conversations in order to have, like a blueprint, a national blueprint, if you will, if you wish, that can then be customized for different organizations. Obviously, it would contain a bouquet of, different solutions that would not be applicable to every organization. But then you can take the ones that resonate with you and apply them internally, to suit your context and your culture within the company. And I think it is also part of what CIPM aims to do and, to be able to achieve. So Deloitte leading, CIPM also leading that conversation, at the end of the day would be able to, have a holistic blueprint that can work for large organizations, and they can actually be differentiated according to the size of the companies. It can be for large organizations, for small organizations, for medium-sized organizations. It can be sector specific, and it can be sector agnostic. I mean, at the end of the day, what is important is that we have a set of, like a playbook, if you will, that, can be applied by different organizations to customize to their needs and the needs of their people as required. So it was a comment, I think, not a question, but that resonates very well with me.
Thank you so much. You've just spoken Franklin's mind. That was what he was calling for.
I was going to say that.
That playbook. That we need that playbook for human resources. Unfortunately, like all playbooks, they become extremely obsolete, within 1 year, 2 years, because something comes on, that drives this. So we've just done 9 minutes.
And then you continue to update it.
Yeah,
update
it.
Exactly.
To update. I mean, similar
unfortunately,
to
part of the thing is that we still don't see competitors as part of our ecosystem. The experiments that are being conducted elsewhere, competitors are coming together to form an ecosystem, to win the war for talent, and they are expanding their database of both internal and external, for the skills, so that they are moving skills across. A good example for us would be power. We don't have a lot of skills around power. Yes. And if we can form an ecosystem around power and, able to share our external skills, the consultants who work within the power sector, maybe to help in managing the cost of those interventions. But Oiza, what would you respond? Thank you very much, Esther. I know we've held you for a very long time. I know it's about to drop off as well. And Franklin.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Esther. Full disclosure, I was distracted for a bit.
So Esther, happy to go with you this time around. When you are going, just let me know.
I'll let you know. I'm going right now, so please.
No, but you understand what I'm saying. Not on
I
this.
know.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay, then. Thanks a lot.
Can I add quickly to what?
Yes, sorry, Chizoba, if you could sorry, I was distracted.
No, the individual was saying that, it looks like we can't take small steps. We need to leapfrog some of these issues.
Step changes.
Okay, yes, I recall when you read it out. The word that came to mind in when you were reading out the question was courage. I think it would take courage because again, how do you, we all talk about the only constant thing in life is change, right? Everybody says it. But when it's now time to sort of, put your money where your mouth is, that's when So I'm really still a proponent for taking baby steps, especially if you're not ready, because you need to assess your organizational readiness. There's so many things that that it involves. Even if you look at COVID, a lot of, even in Nigeria, a lot of the organizations that were able to quickly readjust, they already had things in place. So it was just a matter of scaling, what they already were used to. So yeah, we can just say, oh yes, it's time to leapfrog. But you also sort of have to apply wisdom and assess your organizational readiness to do that. If you're ready, then you can take the bold move, take the bold step. And if it doesn't pan out the way you thought it would, then it's about let's iterate. What else can we do? Can we change the approach? Can we sort of keep experimenting until we get it right? But I mean, yes, I'm a bit concerned about from nowhere to 100. I mean, that's my own personal view, really. Thanks.
And that's what Frank has been saying, that one is that challenge. You've got to be very clear on that challenge before you can respond to the challenge, and you've got to understand your context, for you to be able to respond. So thank you very much, Oiza. It's been a great afternoon, and I'm sure that everybody's glad that you joined this conversation and you stayed this long after.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And so, Franklin, before you drop off, let me find that A-level questions. The A-level question that... So, Franklin, somebody is asking, what's the best leadership style in an organization? And then if you also add in this kind of fluid, changing, boundaryless world that we found ourselves in, what are your thoughts around the kinds of leadership, that would get us through? It looks like Oga Franklin is quite busy.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Franklin is here now. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I was just about dropping off, but yeah. So I was going to add something to what Esther said very quickly. I think that maybe the piece that is missing in what she said is the role of technology. We have seen what technology has done in payments, in other ecosystems as we are exploring in InterSwitch, energy, transportation, homes, health. We need to maximize those opportunities within the HR space. And for us as InterSwitch HR, there are quite a few things we're doing that I think would eventually, checking that you can still hear me. I'm not sure if it's just my screen.
Hello, Franklin, you're coming in and out.
Okay. Sugar. Let me try again on the leadership topic. Sad.
So this is a young person asking that what kind of leadership style works best for organizations. And I then now tagged on, in this new world of work, this boundaryless world, what kind of leadership will get us through?
Okay, I think I'm more stable now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so we do have leadership codes at InterSwitch built into our culture. And our leadership code is built around two things: ability to organize and ability to inspire. This is a time where leadership has to be inclusive And I'll just share one thing about inclusivity, which is listening. There is nothing new about the current employee behavior that we're seeing. COVID just created a window, a legitimate window, if you ask me. There's nothing new. People have been clamoring for harmonization, clamoring for wellness and whatnot. So the type of leadership I think that will work, it's not one that is autocratic. It's one that involves and includes everyone at all levels. So, and I know every time we talk about leadership, which is the biggest mistake we've made again around leadership, there's leadership at all levels. Again, we have defined leadership on 5 levels. There's leading self, leading teams, leading leaders, leading business, because we know that the journey, leadership is a journey, and it starts with you knowing how to lead yourself. So every time I use the word leadership, I am speaking to everybody, including the person asking this question, to say this is a time where you need to listen to yourself, you need to listen to your colleague, your boss needs to listen to you, you need to listen to your boss, because most times people look at it from, oh, leadership, my boss needs to hear me. You also need to listen because you're also leaders in your capacity. So again, I think that's what is working. It's working for us so far. Every time we want to roll out a new policy, we sense check, we sound check. We go to employees, we have focus group. It's like a product. The product design guys will do testing, will do quality assurance. So we do that today for a lot of our policies and frameworks. I hope I've answered the question, but thanks. That's my submission. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I have a view that leadership is about mobilizing people to make progress, or to make progress or confront a difficult reality they would rather like to avoid. And that means that, you know, there is up and center a problem that needs to be solved. It's understanding that problem, bringing out the problem, and then trying to mobilize people to make progress, because that problem may not be able to be solved, but people can make progress. And from what I've seen of the Deloitte reports, it says that we've got to adopt a new definition of leadership, which is about everybody at any level can lead the solution to a problem. So it could be a technology problem, it could even be a client problem. Let the people who have the skills and the knowledge be the ones to solve the problem. The job of leadership is not about control. It's now about orchestrating and making it work for them and creating a playing field that allows them to solve the problems that they encounter on a daily basis. And so if that is the new mode of leadership that is required in organizations, we need to start reframing our leadership conversations in our organizations to make sure that everybody needs to know that their voice will be heard and they will be part of the solution. So much more than the command and control is no longer going to work. If you look at our Gen Zs, they do not want that command and control, and they will leave your organization for you. It's not only the director that will be speaking at every meeting, or the GM is the one who has all the solutions. The solution lies in the people who are doing the work. And the question is, how do we mobilize them and orchestrate that solution from? So we need new management practices. We need new management practices. This thing that we're talking about, worker agency, is very, very critical. There is a lot of sensing, there is a lot of surveys, there's a lot of feedback that we must receive from our employees, because that's the only way we will know where the problems are, and then we can bring them into a conversation. So this is a problem. How do we solve it? That's what worker agency is all about. So when we use big words like this, it is about the voice of people to be heard in the organization. We need to bring in the voices. We need to bring in the voices of customers. So we're serving customers. How do they feel about the way that we're serving them? If we know how we're serving them, then we can, if it's a problem, then we can all solve that problem with the customer's understanding. Because just the same way we like things is the same way the customer wants things. They also want customization. And as they are asking for customization, we also then now need to then now mirror what we're doing with the customers and have our own customization, understanding that our people are as important as the work that is being done. So I hope this also just encapsulates some of the conversations that we've had today. And it's already 12:52. I would like to thank all of you, the 200 of you who remained, to be part of this conversation. And I hope that it was a useful session for you. Thank you so much. And we'll take the conversations to LinkedIn, to Twitter, to Instagram, to TikTok. Let's continue these conversations around the human capital trends and what you're seeing. Have a good day, everyone. And thank you, Joseph, for the platform. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Deloitte team. It was awesome. Elijah, Chike, Toby, Dimeji, Dara, Nkem, Uloma, and I think whoever it is I'm missing, thank you. And then for all of you who have been part of this conversation, God bless you. Thank you so, so, so much. You can always find me on LinkedIn and we can continue the conversation there. Thank you very much. And Chike, if you can download these questions so that we can also see how we can, Deloitte can respond to it.
Take it forward.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone. And please send me some love on the chat. Send me some love.
Thank you.
There are plenty already.
Send